It began with whispers, faint, almost imperceptible murmurs that traveled across centuries, carried by scribes, travelers, and the occasional historian daring enough to record what others had tried to erase. Alexander the Great, the man who had conquered half the known world by the age of 32, had vanished, not in life, but in death. His tomb, a resting place fit for a king who had claimed empires, disappeared almost immediately after his passing. And yet, the story of this disappearance is not merely one of absence. It is a tale threaded with secrecy, obsession, and human ambition that refuses to die. Alexander had achieved what few mortals could even dream of. Born in the palace of Pella, the ancient Macedonian capital, he was tutored by Aristotle, a philosopher who imbued in him both a love of knowledge and a sense of destiny. By the time he had reached adulthood, he was already a general, a strategist, and a figure whose shadow stretched across the known world. His campaigns were legendary. The conquest of Persia, the liberation of Egypt, and the relentless pursuit eastward to the edge of the known lands. Yet, for all his brilliance and courage, Alexander's final chapter began not on a battlefield, but in a palace chamber in Babylon, where fever and exhaustion claimed him in the prime of life. When he died, the question of where he would be buried became as urgent as the battles he had fought. It was not merely a matter of honoring a king. The resting place of Alexander was a symbol of power, legitimacy, and ambition. To possess his tomb was to hold a key to a legacy that could influence empires. Almost immediately, the scramble began. Ptolemy, one of Alexander's trusted generals and later the founder of the Ptolemaic dynasty in Egypt, allegedly diverted the body from Babylon, transporting it along a secretive route that would become the stuff of legend. Along the way, stories emerged of tombs erected and destroyed, of cities rising and falling, each layer of history threatening to bury the truth beneath its sands. Yet the records are frustratingly inconsistent. Ancient historians offer contradictory accounts. Some claim Alexander's body was placed in a magnificent golden sarcophagus. Others suggest it was interred in a humble, almost secret chamber. Some texts hint at rituals so elaborate they defy comprehension. Others whisper of greed, political maneuvering, and betrayal. The more one investigates, the murkier the truth becomes. And in this haze of uncertainty, the first layer of the modern mystery emerges. If Alexander was a man of unmatched influence in life, why should his final resting place vanish so completely? By the time Alexandria in Egypt rose to prominence, it was already linked to the enigma of Alexander's tomb. The city itself seemed to be built around a promise, a question. What treasures or secrets were hidden beneath its streets? Ancient travelers and chroniclers spoke of a mausoleum so awe-inspiring that rulers would journey great distances just to pay homage, yet no definitive evidence of the tomb's exact location survived. Even in antiquity, the line between myth and fact blurred, creating a puzzle that would torment historians for millennia. Part of the intrigue lies in human obsession. Across centuries, kings, emperors, and invaders sought to claim Alexander's remains. The Roman Emperor Augustus allegedly visited the tomb to honor the legendary conqueror, and yet by the Middle Ages, the location had slipped from memory, obscured by deliberate erasures, forgotten maps, and perhaps even fear. What was so powerful or so dangerous about Alexander's tomb that people felt compelled to hide it or pretend it did not exist? Was it merely the human desire to possess the past? Or did something more profound lie beneath the surface, a secret that threatened the very narratives of power and empire? As we explore this history, it becomes clear that Alexander's tomb is more than stone and gold. It is a mirror reflecting human ambition, fear, and the relentless drive to touch immortality. Every century adds a new layer of mystery. Byzantine looters, treasure hunters of the Renaissance, and modern archaeologists each follow faint traces, often ending in disappointment or disappearance. The search itself has become a story as captivating as Alexander's conquests, filled with danger, deceit, and revelation. And yet, perhaps the greatest tension comes from what is missing. In a world so meticulously chronicled, so recorded in the annals of empires, why does the trail of Alexander's final resting place go cold? Was it hidden by those who loved him, by those who feared him, or by the inexorable march of time itself? Each theory carries a weight of human emotion, the awe of creation, the terror of losing legacy, and the longing to touch the life of a man who changed the course of history. By the end of this section, the audience is left with a haunting thought: a king who dominated continents, inspired legends, and reshaped the world could disappear from history itself, not merely as a story, but as a physical presence. What secret was so dangerous, so profoundly consequential, that it demanded silence across centuries? And in that silence, a shadow grows, a shadow that stretches across deserts, palaces, and forgotten ruins, waiting to be uncovered. The story we are about to follow is one of obsession, ambition, and relentless curiosity. It is a journey into the unknown, through deserts and ruins, through the accounts of scholars and whispers of conspiracies, toward a single, elusive truth. Alexander's tomb is more than a resting place. It is a symbol, a question, a challenge that has defied historians, adventurers, and empires alike. And as the sands of history shift, we begin to chase not just the tomb, but the shadow it casts, a shadow over history itself. Alexander's story begins long before the thunder of battle drums or the dust of cavalry charges. Born in 356 BCE in Pella, the ancient capital of Macedonia, he arrived as the son of King Philip II, a ruler whose ambition and military genius had already reshaped his corner of the world. From the very beginning, Alexander was marked for greatness, or perhaps for tragedy. His mother, Olympias, whispered of divine descent, tracing his bloodline to heroes of myth and gods themselves. In a palace filled with political intrigue, young Alexander learned that power was both a gift and a trap, that greatness demanded courage, cunning, and sometimes cruelty. Under the tutelage of Aristotle, Alexander's mind became a forge of strategy, philosophy, and wonder. He devoured knowledge as if it were sustenance. Histories of empires, accounts of distant lands, lessons in science and rhetoric. Yet Aristotle also imparted a subtle warning: the world is vast, and power is fleeting. Every empire, no matter how grand, is vulnerable to ambition, betrayal, and time itself. This lesson, learned amid sunlit halls and scroll-filled libraries, would guide Alexander as he matured into a leader capable of bending nations to his will. By his early 20s, Alexander was no longer a student but a commander. Macedonia, once a relatively minor kingdom, became a launching pad for one of history's most audacious campaigns. He inherited a disciplined army, battle-hardened and loyal, yet even their devotion would be tested. At the Battle of Chaeronea, Alexander displayed a brilliance that would become his signature: swift maneuvers, calculated risks, and the uncanny ability to predict the enemy's next move. Victory came not by brute force alone, but through vision, through an almost prophetic understanding of terrain, morale, and timing. From this moment, whispers of his genius began to spread, blending admiration with fear. The conquest of Persia marked the height of Alexander's ambition. Across deserts, mountains, and rivers, he pursued Darius III with relentless energy. Cities fell at his approach, yet Alexander often allowed clemency, fostering loyalty from those who surrendered. This combination of ruthlessness and calculated mercy became a defining paradox. He was both a liberator and a conqueror, a hero to some, a tyrant to others. Every victory expanded not just territory but legend, cementing his image as a man who could defy limits set by nature, culture, or tradition. Egypt, too, will become a canvas for his vision. Welcomed as a liberator, Alexander founded Alexandria, a city destined to become a hub of knowledge and culture. Here, the seeds of his enduring legacy took root, not just as a conqueror, but as a visionary who understood the power of culture, architecture, and learning. The Ptolemies would later claim this city as the site of his tomb. Yet even in life, Alexander's presence was a blend of history and myth, a figure whose reality often seemed larger than the world itself. Yet even amidst triumph, Alexander's life was shadowed by human frailty. His closest companions, the companions, were both loyal friends and potential threats. Paranoia and ambition danced together in his court, as generals plotted and rivals schemed. Alexander himself was not immune to extremes. Moments of mercy alternated with episodes of fury, and celebrations could descend into violence. It was a reminder that behind the legend lay a man of flesh and blood, whose desires, fears, and choices would ultimately shape not just his life, but the memory of his empire. By the time Alexander reached the edges of India, his army had marched thousands of miles, endured brutal climates, and confronted civilizations rich in culture and strategy. Yet even here, at the height of his power, hints of mortality began to surface. Soldiers murmured of fatigue, of doubt, and of the impossibility of sustaining a world in perpetual conquest. Alexander, driven by a vision that had begun in the classrooms of Aristotle and the battlefields of Macedonia, pressed onward. He was relentless, obsessive, almost untouchable, and yet the closer he moved to immortality in history, the more fragile his human life became. It is this paradox, immense power shadowed by mortal vulnerability, that makes the story of his tomb so compelling. For a man who seemed to defy death and life, the question of death itself became an enigma. When he fell ill in Babylon, struck down not by an enemy sword but by fever and exhaustion, the world seemed to hesitate. His empire, vast and fragile, teetered on the edge of uncertainty. His generals, companions, and subjects faced a future without the man whose presence had commanded loyalty and fear in equal measure. The stakes of his burial were unprecedented. It was not merely a question of honoring a king, but of preserving a legacy that spanned continents. And this is where the shadow of mystery begins. Alexander's body, once laid out in Babylon, became the focus of political maneuvering, secrecy, and intrigue. Ptolemy's alleged theft, the whispered relocations, and the stories of guarded tombs set the stage for centuries of obsession. The greatest conqueror of the ancient world had vanished, and with him, the certainty of history itself. Every subsequent generation, historians, archaeologists, treasure hunters, and dreamers, would grapple with fragments, contradictions, and shadows. The legend of Alexander's life now merged with the enigma of his death, a puzzle whose pieces have been scattered across the known world. Even today, Alexander's brilliance resonates not merely in military strategy, but in the human imagination. We see him as the embodiment of ambition, genius, and audacity. And yet, the story of his tomb reminds us that even the greatest lives leave questions unanswered. The human history is fragile, and that the pursuit of truth can be as perilous as battle. The tomb is more than a resting place. It is a mirror reflecting the obsessions, fears, and relentless curiosity that define humanity itself. To follow the search for Alexander's tomb is to follow the echoes of his life, step by step, across deserts, ruins, and centuries of silence. By the end of this section, we recognize a profound tension. Alexander conquered lands, peoples, and cities, but he could not conquer time itself. His life, immortalized in stories and monuments, leads us inexorably toward a single haunting question. If a man capable of bending the world to his will could disappear, what does that disappearance say about power, legacy, and the secrets that survive long after we are gone? And so, the stage is set, not just to recount the life of Alexander, but to chase the shadow of his tomb, a quest that will reveal as much about human ambition as it does about history itself. The world had never witnessed a death so monumental. Alexander, the man who had forged an empire stretching from Macedonia to the Indus River, now lay on a bed of fever and exhaustion in Babylon. His life had been a storm of battles, triumphs, and legend, and yet, in death, the storm shifted to uncertainty. The question that rose almost immediately was not, how did he die? But, where would he rest? For a king of unmatched ambition, the answer would define not only his legacy but the fate of empires that followed. According to the surviving chronicles, Alexander's body was first prepared with the most lavish rites. Babylonian priests, Macedonian companions, and local dignitaries convened, attending to the rituals that honored both human achievement and divine ancestry. Gold, fine linens, and rare spices were applied, embalming the conqueror with a reverence usually reserved for gods. Yet already, political forces moved in the shadows. Ptolemy, one of Alexander's closest generals and later the founder of Egypt's Ptolemaic dynasty, allegedly orchestrated the diversion of the body, asserting a claim not just over the corpse, but over the power and legitimacy it symbolized. The journey that followed is as much legend as history. The body, encased in a golden sarcophagus according to some accounts, traveled under heavy guard through lands still shaking from Alexander's campaigns. Historians speculate that Ptolemy feared that leaving the body in Babylon would invite unrest, challenge his authority, or tempt rivals to claim the legacy of Alexander as their own. Yet the records are frustratingly vague, often contradictory, hinting that secrecy and perhaps deception were central to the plan. Some chronicles suggest elaborate detours and hidden paths designed to confuse potential pursuers. Others whisper of a body stolen in the dead of night, escorted under the cover of darkness through deserts and ruins, beyond even the knowledge of most historians of the time. It is at this juncture that the human element begins to dominate the story. Imagine the soldiers and attendants, loyal yet wary, tasked with carrying the body of a man whose presence had once demanded awe. They traversed cities still smoldering from war, navigating political instability, rival factions, and treacherous terrain. For them, the mission was not simply ceremonial, it was survival. Rumors of bandits, conspirators, and rival generals eager to claim Alexander's body would have hung over them like a storm cloud. Every step was weighed with both reverence and fear, knowing that the consequences of failure could reverberate through history. And yet, despite the precision and care, ambiguity persisted. Ancient accounts disagree on the route, the stops, and even the final intended location. Some texts suggest Alexandria in Egypt, a city Ptolemy was building to rival the glory of Greece itself. Others hint at hidden tombs in distant regions, secret chambers constructed to preserve Alexander's remains away from prying eyes. One thing is clear: whoever controlled the body controlled history. The physical presence of Alexander was more than a relic. It was legitimacy, power, and a symbol of empire condensed into gold and flesh. The narrative of this burial is also threaded with whispers of divine significance. Alexander's death at a young age, coupled with his extraordinary achievements, already lent him an aura of godhood in life. In death, the rituals and secrecy surrounding his body only amplified this perception. Every movement of the sarcophagus, every hidden path or veiled ceremony, transformed the act of burial into a performance of power and a negotiation with destiny itself. Kings and generals who encountered these arrangements were not merely dealing with a corpse. They were confronting the weight of history, the embodiment of a man whose life had reshaped the known world. Yet the most compelling part of this story lies in its unresolved mysteries. Was the tomb at Alexandria truly the final resting place, or was it a deliberate ruse to protect the body from political threats? Did Ptolemy or subsequent rulers alter the location, burying Alexander somewhere unknown, where even their own successors might never find him? And why, centuries later, does no clear trace remain? Every attempt to locate the tomb seems to end with more questions than answers. Cities have risen and fallen, rivers have shifted course, and yet the legend of the burial persists, haunting scholars, adventurers, and dreamers alike. There's also a profound emotional dimension to consider. Alexander's death was not just a historical event, it was a human tragedy. His companions mourned not only the loss of a leader, but of a man whose ambition, genius, and charisma had inspired unwavering loyalty. The rituals and secrecy of the burial were themselves acts of grief, attempts to hold on to something larger than life. In the stories that survived, one can almost feel the tension between devotion and fear. Devotion to a legendary figure, fear of what the future might hold without him. By the time the Ptolemaic dynasty stabilized in Egypt, the legend of Alexander's tomb had grown. Alexandria, the city built to immortalize Ptolemy's ambitions, became the focal point of speculation. Visitors and historians claimed to see monuments, inscriptions, and mausoleums dedicated to the conqueror. Yet the precise location remained elusive. By the Middle Ages, even this knowledge had faded into rumor and myth. The burial that had once been a political maneuver became a riddle that transcended generations, a puzzle that would haunt anyone daring to piece together Alexander's final journey. In the end, the burial of Alexander the Great is more than a historical footnote. It is the origin of an enduring mystery. It represents human obsession with legacy, power, and memory. The golden sarcophagus, the secretive journey, the debates over location. Each element speaks to the tension between mortality and immortality, between ambition and the unknowable passage of time. And as we consider the countless expeditions, writings, and whispers that have pursued the tomb through centuries, one truth becomes evident. Alexander's death did not end his influence. On the contrary, it transformed him into a legend whose shadow stretches across history, challenging every generation to confront the enigma of a conqueror who could not be contained, even in death. As the audience reflects on this journey, a chilling question emerges. If a man who reshaped the world could vanish in death, what truths might remain hidden, waiting for the bold or the reckless to uncover them? The stage is set, the path uncertain, and the shadow of Alexander's tomb looms over history itself, inviting those who dare to continue the search into a labyrinth of secrecy, ambition, and mystery. Even as Alexander's body journeyed under secrecy, stories began to emerge, carried by travelers, scribes, and whispers among those who had glimpsed the events firsthand. Babylon itself, once a gleaming jewel of Mesopotamia, seemed almost to mourn the loss of the conqueror. Its streets, filled with merchants, priests, and soldiers, became a stage for rumors that refused to die. Some said Alexander's corpse had been spirited away under a shroud of gold, hidden in a secret chamber beneath the city. Others insisted that the body had been transported to Egypt, where Ptolemy's ambition would ensure both reverence and security. The truth, if it had ever been known, vanished into shadows, leaving only fragments for historians and adventurers to reconstruct. As empires rose and fell, the trail of Alexander's final resting place became intertwined with the shifting geography of the ancient world. Cities once bustling with trade and culture now lay in ruins, swallowed by desert sands, eroded by rivers, or destroyed by invaders. Babylon itself, a city of legend, was gradually abandoned, its grandeur reduced to scattered bricks and sun-baked ruins. Travelers centuries later could only speculate, tracing the faint outlines of temples, streets, and palaces, imagining the ceremonies and conspiracies that had occurred there. Each lost city became a piece of the puzzle, a potential clue or a deliberate misdirection, adding layers of mystery to the conqueror's disappearance. The ancient historians themselves contributed to the enigma. Figures such as Plutarch, Arrian, and Diodorus wrote accounts that mixed observation with rumor, fact with speculation. In their writings, Alexander's body became both literal and symbolic, a prize to be fought over, a relic to inspire loyalty, and a testament to the fragility of human memory. Yet even their accounts conflicted. Some claimed the tomb was magnificent, a monument rivaling the gods themselves. Others insisted it was modest, almost secretive, hidden to protect the man from the world he had conquered. The contradictions only deepened the allure of the mystery, compelling generations to chase fragments of truth across continents. As the centuries passed, whispers turned into legends. Tales of secret chambers beneath cities, of underground tunnels, and of hidden vaults proliferated. In Alexandria, travelers reported glimpses of structures that seemed designed to conceal rather than display. Temples, mausoleums, and palaces were said to contain hidden rooms, passages, or inscriptions, visible only to those who knew the key. Some claimed that even the location of the tomb had been deliberately misrepresented in maps and records, ensuring that only the most persistent or daring would ever find it. These rumors infused the search with a sense of danger and awe, transforming it into a quest worthy of myth. Yet amid the allure, there was also fear. The conqueror's tomb was not merely a resting place. It was a symbol of power, capable of legitimizing rulers, inspiring revolts, or terrifying populations. Political leaders may have deliberately obscured its location to prevent unrest or to control the narrative of Alexander's legacy. Over time, each ruling dynasty, each empire that touched these lands, added its own layer of secrecy, either hiding evidence or erasing the traces of what had come before. The tomb became a palimpsest, written and rewritten by ambition, fear, and reverence. Even today, the faint outlines of lost cities continue to whisper their secrets. Archaeologists, historians, and explorers have uncovered remnants of streets, temples, and tombs that may have once been part of the grand procession of Alexander's remains. Satellite images and ground surveys hint at structures long buried beneath sand, water, or rubble. Every discovery sparks both hope and skepticism, as researchers struggle to distinguish fact from fabrication, relic from rumor. The ancient world itself, shifting and disappearing over millennia, guards its secrets as fiercely as any living protector. The emotional weight of these lost cities cannot be underestimated. Each ruin represents both possibility and disappointment, the remnants of human ambition and the erasure of memory. For those who have dedicated their lives to finding Alexander's tomb, the ruins are more than historical artifacts. They are a test of patience, intellect, and resolve. Every brick, every inscription, and every trace of urban planning may hold a clue, yet the risk of misinterpretation is constant. To follow the footsteps of those ancient cities is to engage with the past in its most tangible and yet most elusive form. And so the legend of Alexander's tomb is inseparable from the landscape of vanished civilizations. Babylon, Alexandria, and countless other lost cities form a web of intrigue, where the echoes of the past challenge the observer to discern truth from myth. The journey through these places is not merely geographic, but intellectual and emotional. Each layer of history offers both evidence and enigma, compelling us to confront not just the disappearance of a king, but the fragility and impermanence of human memory. By the end of this section, the audience begins to understand a critical tension. The tomb's disappearance is not accidental. It is woven into the very fabric of history, entwined with ambition, fear, and the relentless march of time. Every rumor, every lost city, every conflicting account is a reminder that history is rarely straightforward. And yet, within the shadows of these ruins, the possibility of discovery glimmers, inviting those who dare to follow the threads of legend, curiosity, and human obsession toward a truth that has eluded the world for over 2 millennia. The city of Alexandria rises in the imagination like a jewel suspended between history and legend. Founded by Alexander the Great himself in 331 BCE, it was intended not merely as a city, but as a statement, a testament to ambition, intellect, and power. Here, at the crossroads of the Mediterranean and the Nile, East and West met, and cultures, knowledge, and commerce flourished in dazzling harmony. For Alexander, Alexandria was more than a city. It was a vision made concrete, a place where he could leave a mark not only on the world but on eternity itself. It was also the stage for one of history's most tantalizing enigmas, the mystery of his tomb. From the very moment Ptolemy established control over Egypt, Alexandria became the focal point of speculation. Ancient texts describe a mausoleum of extraordinary grandeur, adorned with gold, statues, and inscriptions designed to immortalize the conqueror. Some accounts claim that visitors from distant lands traveled to the city specifically to pay homage, awed by its architectural splendor and the promise of glimpsing the resting place of a man who had reshaped the world. The city itself seemed to breathe ambition. Libraries filled with scrolls, docks crowded with ships, streets alive with traders, scholars, and artisans. In this setting, Alexander's tomb became not just a monument, but a symbol of the human desire to touch greatness, to claim proximity to the divine. Yet the records are as contradictory as they are compelling. Some historians describe the tomb in detail. A golden sarcophagus housed within a grandiose temple, flanked by guards and adorned with offerings. Others suggest that by the time of later generations, the location had been lost, destroyed, or deliberately obscured. The inconsistencies only amplify the intrigue, hinting at secrecy, subterfuge, and the deliberate manipulation of history. Alexandria, a city of light and learning, may also have been a city of shadows, designed to conceal as much as to display. The allure of Alexandria's tomb is magnified by human imagination. Generations of historians, travelers, and adventurers have conjured visions of its location, each theory more elaborate than the last. Some posit that the tomb lay beneath the royal palace, hidden under layers of construction over centuries. Others suggest that it may have been submerged, swallowed by the Nile, or by human intervention, to protect it from those who would desecrate it. Ancient maps and cryptic inscriptions hint at hidden passages and secret chambers, visible only to those who knew how to read the symbols left behind. Every account, whether factual or fantastical, contributes to a tapestry of mystery that stretches across millennia. Political and personal ambition added another layer of complexity. For the Ptolemies, the tomb was a tool of legitimacy, a way to assert continuity with Alexander's authority. Successive rulers may have deliberately altered records, destroyed monuments, or relocated the remains to maintain control. Alexandria itself was rebuilt, expanded, and at times ravaged by earthquakes, invasions, and fires. Each change to the cityscape could have concealed or destroyed evidence, leaving behind tantalizing hints but no certainty. The tomb, if it ever existed as described, became not only a physical space but a narrative weapon wielded by those seeking to shape perception and power. The human stories intertwined with Alexandria are equally compelling. Scholars recount visitors who claim to have glimpsed the tomb, only for their accounts to vanish or be dismissed. Treasure hunters and explorers risked life and reputation in search of evidence, spurred by the possibility of discovering a treasure beyond imagination, or a truth that could rewrite history. Every failure, every mystery, only heightened the city's allure, turning Alexandria into a labyrinth of both culture and secrecy, where each corner might conceal revelation or disappointment. Even the modern historian confronts Alexandria with awe and frustration. Archaeological excavations, satellite imagery, and underwater surveys have uncovered tantalizing hints. Fragments of statues, inscriptions partially buried in sand, and foundations of structures long lost. Yet despite these discoveries, no definitive tomb has emerged. The evidence suggests that, if it existed, it was deliberately hidden or destroyed, its secrets protected by both human design and the relentless passage of time. The city, a beacon of knowledge and civilization, may have been Alexander's final riddle, a place where grandeur and mystery coexist. Emotionally, Alexandria embodies the tension between ambition and impermanence. Alexander envisioned a city that would immortalize him, yet even as it flourished, the certainty of his tomb began to fade. The human desire to conquer time, through monuments, memory, or legend, clashes with the reality of decay, destruction, and the erosion of knowledge. Alexandria thus becomes both a stage and a symbol, a reminder that even the greatest achievements can be obscured, that mystery persists where human ambition meets the inexorable forces of history. Legends within Alexandria also hint at deliberate misdirection. Ancient writers suggest that some monuments may have been decoys designed to draw attention away from the true tomb. Others describe secret chambers accessible only to select priests or officials whose knowledge vanished with them. Every attempt to trace the tomb is complicated by this deliberate ambiguity, leaving modern researchers to sift through layers of myth, architecture, and historical conjecture. The interplay between concealment and revelation turns the city itself into a living puzzle, a place where history and imagination intertwine. By the end of this section, the audience begins to sense the magnitude of the challenge. Alexandria is not merely a location, but a labyrinth of history, culture, and secrecy. Alexander's tomb, if it ever existed, was embedded within a city designed to celebrate and protect him, yet also vulnerable to time, ambition, and disaster. The interplay of fact, legend, and human obsession ensures that the search for the tomb is never straightforward, never safe from speculation or danger. It is a journey that demands both intellect and courage, a quest that has spanned centuries and captivated imaginations across the world. In this city of brilliance and shadows, the question remains, was Alexandria the resting place of a man who conquered the world, or was it a carefully constructed illusion, a jewel of mystery designed to obscure the ultimate truth? The allure of discovery persists, a challenge to every generation that dares to dream of unearthing a secret that even time has been unable to erase. And in the spaces between grand libraries, crumbling temples, and sun-baked streets, the shadow of Alexander's tomb waits, silent yet profoundly present, daring the curious to continue the search. From the very moment Alexander's tomb vanished from public knowledge, human curiosity and greed became relentless forces in the centuries-long pursuit of his final resting place. The tomb, whether hidden, relocated, or destroyed, became an irresistible prize. Not merely a grave, it represented power, legitimacy, and the promise of touching immortality itself. For rulers, soldiers, and adventurers alike, the chance to unearth the remains of the man who had conquered the world was both a temptation and a test, a lure that few could resist, yet most would fail to survive. Roman historians suggest that even Augustus himself visited Alexandria to pay homage to Alexander's body. Whether this was true veneration or a calculated act of political legitimacy is uncertain, but it demonstrates the enduring fascination the conqueror commanded. Across the centuries, the tomb became a symbol, a currency of influence, possession, or even a mere claim, bestowed prestige, drawing rulers and their armies into schemes of search, subterfuge, and at times, outright looting. The human instinct to claim, to possess, and to rewrite history itself fueled countless expeditions, many ending in frustration, ruin, or death. Looters did not merely seek gold or ornate sarcophagi. They sought the weight of history, the allure of proximity to a figure larger than life. Byzantine emperors, medieval treasure hunters, and Renaissance adventurers all pursued rumors, deciphered cryptic texts, and risked perilous journeys across deserts and rivers. Some disappeared without a trace, swallowed by the very landscapes that Alexander himself had once conquered. Others returned with partial artifacts or dubious claims, adding layers of rumor and myth to the already enigmatic tale. Each attempt, successful or not, fueled the legend of the tomb, reinforcing the idea that it was as dangerous as it was coveted. The consequences of these pursuits were often brutal. Tombs were desecrated, inscriptions defaced, and monuments dismantled in the hope of uncovering treasure. Human greed, entwined with ambition and fear, left a trail of destruction across cities like Alexandria, Memphis, and the ruins of Babylon. Scholars speculate that some historical erasures may have been deliberate, designed to protect the tomb from those whose intentions were purely self-serving. Yet, paradoxically, the very acts intended to preserve or control Alexander's legacy may have further obscured it, scattering evidence and creating a labyrinth of clues for future generations. These looters were as varied as their motives. Some were kings and emperors, seeking legitimacy and divine association. Others were mercenaries, wandering scholars, or ordinary men who had glimpsed a fragment of a map or heard a tantalizing rumor. And behind them lurk shadowy figures whose names were lost to time. Agents, spies, and opportunists who moved quietly, erasing records, creating misdirections, and sometimes ensuring that the tomb's location remained unknowable. Across centuries, human ambition and obsession converged in a singular, haunting purpose: to claim a secret that might be more powerful than any kingdom. But fascination alone does not explain the enduring lure of the tomb. There is also the emotional gravity of the story. The idea of Alexander, the conqueror of the known world, lying hidden, untouched, and almost mythical in death, speaks to human awe, fear, and longing. Each looter, each adventurer, is drawn not merely by gold or glory, but by a desire to touch history itself, to confront mortality, and perhaps to glimpse immortality through proximity to a legend. It is a search that blends danger with devotion, greed with curiosity, and obsession with reverence, a mixture that has defined the quest for over 2 millennia. Even today, modern archaeologists and explorers echo this human compulsion. Satellite surveys, underwater excavations, and desert digs are fueled not only by scientific curiosity, but by the same allure that drove medieval treasure hunters. Every fragment, every inscription, and every anomaly in the ruins of ancient cities is a potential key to unlocking the mystery. Yet the shadow of history looms large. Looters past and present have left traces, some real, some deliberately misleading, creating a puzzle that tests intellect, intuition, and patience alike. The legend of looters also raises questions about morality, stewardship, and the cost of obsession. In pursuing the tomb, humanity has repeatedly confronted its own tendencies, the desire to possess, to dominate, and to rewrite history in the image of ambition. Tombs, cities, and artifacts have been lost, destroyed, or relocated in the pursuit of power, leaving behind not just mysteries, but scars on the historical record. The story of Alexander's tomb is as much about human behavior as it is about the man himself, a reflection of our fascination with greatness, the lengths we will go to claim it, and the risks we accept in doing so. By the end of this section, the audience is left with both awe and apprehension. The tomb of Alexander the Great, whether it exists or not, is not merely a destination, but a mirror of human obsession across time. Each looter, whether king or commoner, contributed to the puzzle, leaving a trail of ambition, deceit, and reverence. And in the shadows of Alexandria, Babylon, and countless lost cities, the tomb waits, if it still exists, guarded not by guards, but by the very forces that have chased it for centuries. Time, history, and the inexorable human desire to know, possess, and understand the impossible. If the tomb of Alexander the Great has survived the sweep of time, its location has been obscured not only by natural decay and human looters, but also by deliberate misdirection. From the earliest centuries after his death, scribes, historians, and rulers manipulated records, maps, and rumors, creating a labyrinth of information designed to confuse even the most determined seekers. Alexandria, Babylon, and countless cities across the ancient world became nodes in a sprawling web of intrigue, where truth and fabrication blended seamlessly. Maps, in particular, became instruments of both knowledge and deception. Some ancient cartographers sketched Alexandria and its surroundings with meticulous detail, highlighting temples, harbors, and city streets. Yet hidden among these annotations were deliberate false markers, veiled references, and cryptic symbols, seemingly innocuous, but potentially designed to mislead those searching for Alexander's tomb. A city laid bare to one observer might remain entirely hidden to another, depending on interpretation, familiarity with the symbols, or access to secret oral traditions passed down by priests, scholars, or insiders. Myths played an equally powerful role. Stories of the tomb transformed over time, shifting from historical record to legend, and then to outright fantasy. Some accounts suggested that the tomb was protected by magical wards or curses, warnings that may have been invented to deter intruders or protect political interests. Others claimed that the body itself had been transformed, preserved by unknown methods, or even transported beyond reach, perhaps submerged beneath the Nile, concealed in secret chambers, or relocated to islands lost to history. Each myth added layers of allure and danger, turning a historical site into a psychological puzzle as much as a physical one. Even historians themselves contributed to the fog of uncertainty. Arrian, Plutarch, Diodorus, and later chroniclers offered accounts that conflicted in every detail. The route taken by Ptolemy, the description of the sarcophagus, and the grandeur of the mausoleum all vary. Some writers suggest that the tomb lay within Alexandria itself, perhaps beneath structures that have since been destroyed or buried. Others place it in distant, now-vanished cities, or in secret underground chambers designed to mislead would-be tomb raiders. These contradictions, far from diminishing the legend, enhance it, creating an intricate puzzle that spans centuries, geography, and human imagination. Misdirection was not accidental. The tomb's symbolic power made it a political tool. Successive rulers, from the Ptolemies to Roman emperors, recognized that possession or even the appearance of control over Alexander's remains conferred legitimacy. By obscuring the tomb's location, they could manipulate perception, assert authority, or neutralize rivals. Cities could be built over it, monuments erected to divert attention, and records altered or destroyed, all in the name of controlling history itself. Over centuries, this strategy transformed the tomb from a physical resting place into a conceptual enigma, one that defies both logic and time. Human ambition and curiosity ensured that the tomb would never be forgotten. Treasure hunters, explorers, and scholars continued to pursue every hint, every rumor, and every fragment of evidence. Cryptic inscriptions were interpreted and misinterpreted. Archaeological digs produced tantalizing but inconclusive results, and ancient texts were combed for coded directions. Yet, with every century that passed, the tomb became more elusive, as if protected by a deliberate orchestration of human effort and natural forces alike. The combination of myth, misdirection, and ambition ensured that the search itself became as legendary as Alexander's life. Emotionally, the interplay of maps, myths, and misdirection reveals profound truths about humanity. The pursuit of the tomb is not simply a historical exercise. It is a reflection of our desire to connect with greatness, to uncover secrets lost to time, and to possess fragments of a past that inspires awe. Every misdirection is a challenge, every myth a test of intellect and courage, and every map a potential revelation or deception. The story of Alexander's tomb is thus as much about the seekers as it is about the tomb itself, highlighting the enduring tension between human curiosity and the universe's capacity for mystery. In the modern era, technological advances have added new dimensions to the quest. Satellite imagery, ground-penetrating radar, and sophisticated mapping techniques allow researchers to detect anomalies in the terrain of Alexandria, Babylon, and other potential sites. Yet, even these tools confront the same fundamental problem. Centuries of construction, destruction, and misdirection have altered the landscape. Ancient myths and legends persist alongside scientific data, reminding us that logic and technology can illuminate, but never entirely dispel, the shadows of history. By the end of this section, the audience begins to understand that Alexander's tomb is not just a question of geography. It is a puzzle of narrative, psychology, and human behavior. Every map drawn, every myth propagated, and every historical record manipulated has contributed to a mystery that spans continents and centuries. The tomb exists not only in the physical world, but in the collective imagination of generations who have sought it, imbuing it with a power that transcends stone and gold. The search for Alexander's tomb thus becomes a metaphor for the human struggle to understand history, legacy, and ambition. To follow the clues is to navigate a labyrinth of truth and deception, of brilliance and greed, of memory preserved and memory lost. And as we prepare to follow the next layers of the mystery, the audience is left with a haunting realization. The most elusive treasures are often those that challenge not just the body, but the mind and spirit of every seeker who dares to pursue them. For centuries, the whispers of Alexander's tomb tantalized adventurers, scholars, and treasure hunters alike. Each generation produced its own seekers, drawn by the promise of discovering a relic that could transform history or claim unimaginable wealth. From the Renaissance to the modern era, the search became an obsession, a perilous journey through deserts, ruins, and forgotten landscapes where ambition collided with mortality. To pursue Alexander's tomb was to enter a world where history, myth, and human desire intertwined in dangerous ways. Early explorers relied on fragmented texts, oral traditions, and ancient maps, tools that were as unreliable as they were alluring. They traced the footsteps of Ptolemy's alleged convoy, studied references in Plutarch and Arrian, and interpreted cryptic inscriptions in Alexandria, Babylon, and beyond. Every lead carried both hope and risk. Harsh deserts and shifting rivers threatened life. Political instability in Egypt, Mesopotamia, and surrounding regions compounded the danger. Yet the promise of touching Alexander's legacy, of holding in one's hands a tangible connection to the man who had conquered the known world, proved irresistible. Some explorers returned with partial discoveries that only deepened the mystery. Shards of sarcophagi, fragments of inscriptions, and hints of ceremonial structures emerged from excavations, each offering tantalizing possibilities. Yet with each fragment came uncertainty. Was it truly Alexander's tomb, or merely a decoy, a monument, or a misattributed relic? The ambiguity fueled speculation and rumor, ensuring that each discovery, whether celebrated or dismissed, added layers to the enigma. Even minor artifacts became symbols of obsession, evidence that the tomb might still exist, waiting to be uncovered by those daring enough to continue the search. The human stories from these expeditions are as compelling as the archaeological evidence. Explorers risked illness, betrayal, and financial ruin in pursuit of their goal. Some vanished entirely, swallowed by desert sands or political turmoil. Others returned with tales of near-mystical experiences. Ancient ruins where shadows seemed to shift, inscriptions that hinted at secrets lost to time, and guides who spoke of hidden chambers only accessible to the initiated. The pursuit of Alexander's tomb became an emotional journey as much as a physical one, demanding courage, intellect, and a willingness to confront both danger and obsession. Even governments and rulers became involved. Egyptian authorities, wary of looters or political exploitation, sometimes restricted access to archaeological sites. European colonial powers in the 19th and early 20th centuries sponsored expeditions, hoping to secure prestige, knowledge, or artifacts. These efforts produced maps, diaries, and photographs that continue to inform researchers today, but they also contributed to confusion. Sites were misidentified, records were lost, and discoveries were sometimes intentionally concealed to protect political interests. The search became a tangle of ambition, scholarship, and secrecy, echoing the same dynamics that had surrounded the tomb in ancient times. Technological advances introduced new hope and new frustration. Ground-penetrating radar, aerial surveys, and underwater archaeology allowed explorers to detect anomalies invisible to the naked eye. Yet every modern attempt confronted the same challenges faced by their predecessors. Centuries of construction, natural disasters, and deliberate obfuscation had transformed the landscape. Alexandria had expanded, Babylon had crumbled, and shifting rivers had buried potential clues beneath sediment. Each potential lead was both exciting and confounding, reinforcing the tomb's reputation as the ultimate enigma of history. Emotionally, the pursuit of Alexander's tomb reveals a paradox. The closer explorers come to the possible location, the more elusive it seems. The tomb is not merely a physical goal. It is a test of perseverance, intellect, and human ambition. Those who dedicate years, or even lifetimes, to the search confront the same tension that defined Alexander's life: the desire to achieve immortality, to conquer time, and to leave a mark upon history. The tomb embodies the intersection of ambition and mortality, a symbol of human fascination with legacy, power, and the unknown. Legendary stories from these expeditions only magnify the sense of danger and wonder. Some explorers claim to be guided by dreams or visions, convinced that Alexander himself had left signs to direct the worthy. Others spoke of secret manuscripts, hidden passages, or coded inscriptions that could unlock the location. Each account, whether credible or fantastical, contributes to a sense of cinematic suspense, painting the search as a narrative filled with peril, revelation, and human drama. The tomb becomes more than a goal. It becomes a character, an antagonist, and a lure, challenging every seeker to prove their worth. By the end of this section, the audience begins to grasp the scale of the obsession. Alexander's tomb is more than a burial site. It is a mirror of human desire, reflecting the extremes of curiosity, ambition, and risk. Explorers through the centuries, from Renaissance scholars to modern archaeologists, have pursued fragments, rumors, and shadows, each contributing to the legend while simultaneously becoming part of it. The search itself, with all its danger and allure, has shaped history, imagination, and scholarship, ensuring that the mystery endures far beyond any single expedition. The pursuit of Alexander's tomb is therefore not merely an archaeological quest. It is a journey into human nature. Ambition, courage, fear, and curiosity converge in the shadows of ruins and deserts, in the pages of ancient texts and the faint outlines of maps. Each step toward discovery illuminates not only the past, but the persistent allure of the unknown. And as we move forward into the modern era, the quest continues, blending science, myth, and obsession into a story that remains one of history's most enduring mysteries. The mystery of Alexander's tomb leapt from the pages of history into the imaginations of modern explorers, whose tools and technology offered new hope, yet confronted the same timeless challenges. In the 19th and early 20th centuries, a wave of archaeological expeditions surged through Alexandria, Egypt, and the surrounding regions. European scholars, funded by museums, universities, and colonial powers, sought not only to uncover the tomb, but also to cement prestige, wealth, and historical legacy. Yet for all the innovation, each expedition quickly revealed a harsh truth. Alexander's final resting place remained as elusive and impenetrable as ever. Early modern archaeologists combed Alexandria's streets, marketplaces, and ruins with meticulous care, guided by ancient texts, local lore, and the fragmented maps that had survived centuries. They traced possible subterranean chambers beneath royal palaces, examined crypts that had lain undisturbed for centuries, and scrutinized monuments for hidden clues. Every stone and inscription was analyzed for potential relevance, yet each discovery seemed only to deepen the mystery. Occasionally, artifacts surfaced, fragments of stone carvings, remnants of sarcophagi, or inscriptions referencing royal processions. But definitive proof of the tomb itself remained tantalizingly out of reach. The quest was far from safe. Desert expeditions exposed explorers to heat, disease, and the unpredictable whims of nature. Swollen rivers, sandstorms, and treacherous ruins claimed lives and equipment, leaving even the most determined teams frustrated. Political instability in Egypt and the surrounding territories compounded the danger. Authorities concerned with looting, relic smuggling, or political misinterpretation sometimes restricted access or confiscated findings. Despite meticulous planning, the search for Alexander's tomb became a dangerous interplay between ambition, survival, and the relentless pursuit of history. Some expeditions veered into obsession. Explorers, consumed by the allure of uncovering the final resting place of the man who had conquered the world, spent months, sometimes years, living among ruins, deciphering cryptic symbols, and consulting local guides whose knowledge was as mysterious as it was incomplete. Diaries and letters from these adventurers recount sleepless nights, moments of elation at perceived clues, and crushing despair when discoveries proved illusory. In some cases, scholars abandoned other projects entirely, dedicating their lives to the tomb alone, echoing the centuries-old human fascination with Alexander's legacy. Legends and rumors continued to complicate the search. Local stories spoke of secret chambers buried beneath palaces or concealed in catacombs, often accessible only through hidden keys or secret passageways. Some explorers reported partial evidence of elaborate funerary architecture, carved stairways descending into darkness, chambers adorned with symbols of royalty and divinity, and walls inscribed with inscriptions hinting at the path of Ptolemy's convoy. Whether these were authentic remnants or the products of overzealous interpretation remains debated, but they kept hope alive, sustaining the enduring narrative that the tomb, though hidden, still existed. The human cost of these pursuits was significant. Illness, accidents, and the sheer physical strain of navigating ancient ruins claimed the lives of many. Rivalries among archaeologists and adventurers often erupted, fueled by competing claims, the pressure of discovery, and the stakes of academic prestige. Expeditions sometimes descended into clandestine operations, with scholars and treasure hunters working at night or in secrecy to avoid interference from local authorities or rivals. Every day of exploration combined anticipation with risk, making the search for Alexander's tomb an exercise in both courage and obsession. Yet amidst danger and frustration, there were breakthroughs. Researchers uncovered partial sarcophagi fragments, inscriptions referencing Alexander's processions, and ceremonial objects that hinted at the grandeur of the tomb that might have existed. Each finding, though incomplete, offered a tangible connection to the past, a whisper of the magnificence that once accompanied Alexander's final journey. These fragments became touchstones, fueling speculation, debate, and further exploration, ensuring that the hunt remained as much a psychological and cultural pursuit as a physical one. Modern science added new dimensions to the quest. Ground-penetrating radar, 3D mapping, and advanced satellite imaging revealed anomalies beneath ancient streets, canals, and ruins, sparking renewed hope. Yet even with these tools, the tomb's location remained uncertain. Layers of construction, centuries of flooding, and deliberate obfuscation by ancient rulers have created a puzzle of extraordinary complexity. Each technological advance illuminates some mysteries while simultaneously uncovering new questions, reinforcing the notion that Alexander's tomb is as much a conceptual enigma as it is a physical site. The emotional stakes of these modern hunts mirror the ambitions of Ptolemy and the looters of legend. Explorers confront the same tension between devotion, curiosity, and desire that has surrounded Alexander's legacy for over 2 millennia. To seek the tomb is to engage with history at its most visceral level, the interplay of human ambition, mortality, and memory. It is a journey where hope and despair coexist, where discovery is as much about the mind and imagination as it is about the physical act of excavation. By the end of this section, the audience senses the extraordinary resilience of the mystery. Despite centuries of searches, technological advances, and human ingenuity, Alexander's tomb remains elusive, a shadow lurking beneath ruins, beneath sand, beneath layers of history and legend. Modern explorers, armed with knowledge and tools unimaginable to their ancient predecessors, confront the same enigma that has haunted scholars, kings, and adventurers alike. And in their pursuit, the tomb transcends mere physicality, becoming a symbol of human obsession, ambition, and the desire to touch greatness, even across the span of millennia. The search for Alexander's tomb continues, not only as an archaeological endeavor, but as a testament to the enduring power of myth, history, and human curiosity. Each expedition adds a new chapter to the narrative, blending fact, speculation, and imagination. The tomb, whether hidden, relocated, or lost forever, remains a challenge and a promise. A secret whose revelation could reshape our understanding of one of history's greatest figures, and whose elusiveness continues to captivate every generation willing to risk everything in pursuit of the impossible. Among the ruins, sand, and shadows, the pursuit of Alexander's tomb often leads seekers back to a singular source, the ancient texts. These manuscripts, inscribed centuries ago by historians, priests, and chroniclers, hold the echoes of a time when Alexander's life and death were unfolding in real time. Yet within these pages lies both illumination and ambiguity. Every word could be a hint or a trap, every line a fragment of truth or deliberate misdirection. For those who dare to read them, the texts are a labyrinth as intricate and perilous as the deserts and cities that conceal the tomb itself. The first and most cited sources are the works of Arrian, Plutarch, and Diodorus, each attempting to record the life and death of the conqueror. Arrian provides detailed accounts of Alexander's campaigns and hints at the final procession of his body, emphasizing the grandeur and ritualistic care bestowed upon the fallen king. Plutarch focuses on character and motive, suggesting that Ptolemy's control over the corpse was as much about political legitimacy as about reverence. Diodorus offers fragments of rumor and legend, reflecting the oral traditions of a world that remembered Alexander not merely as a man, but as a semi-divine force whose presence shaped the destiny of nations. Yet even these primary sources are riddled with contradictions. Arrian suggests that the body was taken to Memphis before Alexandria, while Plutarch implies that Alexandria was always the intended resting place. Diodorus provides alternative routes, secret chambers, and ceremonial details that sometimes conflict with the other accounts. For centuries, scholars have debated which account, if any, is accurate. The contradictions themselves may have been deliberate. Ancient chroniclers often wrote under the influence of political powers, their words shaped by loyalty, fear, or ambition. In this sense, the texts serve both as guides and as obstacles, preserving history while obscuring it. Beyond these well-known historians, lesser-known manuscripts offer tantalizing clues. Egyptian priests, Babylonian scribes, and later Roman chroniclers left records that hint at secret tombs, hidden sarcophagi, and ceremonial pathways that may have guided Alexander's remains. Some inscriptions refer to gold, divine iconography, or cryptic instructions, suggesting that those in the know intentionally encoded details to prevent looters from uncovering the site. Over time, these manuscripts became fragmented, lost, or deliberately destroyed, leaving only tantalizing scraps for modern explorers to piece together. Each fragment is both a promise and a puzzle, demanding interpretation, intuition, and sometimes daring conjecture. Human obsession with these texts intensified during the Renaissance and the Enlightenment. Scholars rediscovered classical manuscripts, translating, annotating, and debating their meaning. Some believe that clues to the tomb were hidden in overlooked passages, obscure references, or linguistic subtleties. Entire debates arose over the translation of a single word or phrase, as the interpretation could suggest an entirely different route, city, or ceremonial practice. The texts themselves became a battleground, a site where human ambition collided with historical uncertainty, echoing the same motives that had guided Ptolemy and looters centuries earlier. Yet the ancient texts are not merely technical documents. They are human stories. They describe the awe of those who witnessed Alexander's conquests, the loyalty of companions, and the fear and ambition of those who followed him in death. They reveal the psychology of power, how control over a body could confer legitimacy, how secrecy could be weaponized, and how myth could be cultivated to shape memory. Each manuscript is a portal into the emotional and political world of the ancient Mediterranean, allowing modern readers to grasp the human stakes behind the legend. Some manuscripts also hint at symbolic or metaphysical considerations. Alexander was not just a conqueror. He was perceived as divine, a bridge between human and God. The tomb itself may have been designed not merely to house a corpse, but to serve as a sacred site, aligned with celestial patterns, adorned with symbolic imagery, or constructed to convey a message to future generations. These possibilities elevate the search from archaeology to a philosophical and almost spiritual endeavor, transforming every clue into a meditation on mortality, legacy, and the intersection of human ambition with eternity. Despite the centuries of study, the texts yield only partial certainty. No single manuscript provides definitive directions or coordinates. Instead, they offer glimpses, patterns, and hints, a ceremonial procession here, a cryptic map reference there, a description of rituals that might reveal the sarcophagus's location. The modern scholar must weave together these fragments, balancing historical rigor with imaginative interpretation, intuition with evidence. It is a task that demands patience, intellect, and respect for both the text and the culture that produced it. By the end of this section, the audience comes to appreciate the power and peril of the ancient texts. They are guides, guardians, and provocateurs all at once, preserving history while simultaneously shrouding it in mystery. Each manuscript, fragment, and inscription is a thread in a tapestry that stretches across time, linking ancient ambitions to modern quests. They are reminders that Alexander's tomb is not merely a physical location, but a puzzle that challenges intellect, courage, and imagination across the centuries. In the shadows of libraries, ruins, and desert winds, the texts whisper their secrets, daring explorers to decipher, interpret, and act. The pursuit of Alexander's tomb, mediated through these manuscripts, becomes a story of human desire to touch greatness, to uncover the unknowable, and to confront the tension between myth and history. And as the audience reflects on the power of these clues, the realization emerges that every reader, scholar, and seeker becomes part of the legend, walking the same path of curiosity, ambition, and reverence that has defined the quest for over 2,000 years. If the ancient texts hint at the tomb, it is in the symbols carved into stone, bronze, and plaster that the clues seem to take physical form. Across Alexandria, Babylon, and the ruins of forgotten cities, cryptic inscriptions and artistic motifs suggest hidden knowledge, a secret language designed to be understood only by those initiated into the mysteries of Alexander's death and burial. These symbols, often overlooked by casual observers, have tantalized scholars and explorers for centuries, hinting at pathways, rituals, and locations that may hold the key to the tomb's ultimate secret. In Alexandria, remnants of monumental architecture offer tantalizing possibilities. Some columns and walls bear inscriptions that appear to encode directions or ceremonial sequences. Others display abstract motifs, geometric patterns, symbolic animals, or celestial references that hint at the divine nature of the king and the sacred purpose of his burial. Scholars have long debated whether these markings are purely decorative or whether they are deliberate messages meant to guide only the worthy. The ambiguity itself is deliberate, creating a layer of misdirection that both protects the tomb and preserves its mystery. Babylon, though largely destroyed, has also yielded traces of symbolic communication. Ancient records and ruins suggest that temples and palaces contained inscriptions intended to mislead looters while preserving the knowledge for initiates. Some archaeologists believe that patterns in brickwork, relief carvings, or the alignment of structures were intended as guides to a hidden chamber, a subterranean sanctuary, or even a network of underground tunnels. Each discovery provides a tantalizing hint, yet the puzzle is far from complete. For every symbol uncovered, another layer of secrecy remains, reinforcing the legend that Alexander's tomb was never meant to be found by casual seekers. The use of symbols is not merely practical. It carries deep emotional and psychological resonance. In the ancient world, symbolic language was a means of preserving knowledge, conveying sacred truths, and protecting the powerful from those who would misuse them. For Alexander, whose life was intertwined with divinity, conquest, and legend, the tomb itself may have been conceived as a coded testament to his greatness. The inscriptions and symbols thus serve as both guides and guardians, challenging explorers to decode the past while respecting its inherent power. Coded inscriptions also appear in manuscripts and records associated with the tomb. Cryptic notations in Greek, Egyptian, and Babylonian scripts hint at directions, ritual sequences, and locations that may have been visible only to those trained in their interpretation. These codes often reference celestial bodies, ceremonial objects, or specific dates, suggesting that the tomb was part of a grand cosmological and symbolic design. The texts and the stones, when considered together, form a layered puzzle that spans geography, language, and time, a challenge that few have been equipped to confront fully. Explorers and scholars have approached these symbols with varying degrees of success. Some have identified patterns that align with ancient accounts, offering tantalizing leads on the tomb's possible location. Others have interpreted signs as metaphorical or symbolic, rather than literal, pointing to philosophical or religious meanings rather than physical spaces. This duality, the tension between literal and symbolic interpretation, adds depth to the mystery, suggesting that the tomb, if it exists, was meant to test both intellect and intuition. Those who fail to grasp the interplay between text, symbol, and ritual may be led astray, wandering endlessly among ruins and shadows. The emotional resonance of these symbols is profound. They are not mere codes. They are echoes of a civilization, a language of devotion, reverence, and secrecy. Each carving, each pattern, each geometric motif carries the weight of human ambition, fear, and awe. They are reminders that the search for Alexander's tomb is not only a quest for a physical artifact, but also a confrontation with the ideals and obsessions of an ancient world. The symbols connect past and present, linking modern seekers to the intentions, anxieties, and reverence of those who lived and died in the shadow of one of history's greatest figures. Yet symbols are double-edged. While they promise guidance, they also mislead. Decades of interpretation have shown that some symbols are deliberate red herrings, designed to confuse looters or rival powers. Temples and tombs often employed layered systems of meaning, where one symbol led to another, creating a chain of discovery that required intelligence, intuition, and patience. The very act of reading the symbols becomes a psychological test, reflecting the enduring tension between human curiosity and the protective strategies employed by the ancient custodians of Alexander's legacy. By the end of this section, the audience begins to appreciate the tomb not just as a location, but as a masterpiece of symbolic architecture. Each stone, each carving, each cryptic motif embodies the intersection of human genius, ambition, and reverence. The search for Alexander's tomb is thus transformed from a hunt for gold or artifacts into a journey through layered meaning, where history, art, and psychology converge. The audience is left with a sense of awe at the meticulousness of the ancient world, and at the challenge that still awaits those daring enough to decode its secrets. In these symbols, the legacy of Alexander persists, enigmatic and eternal. They whisper of a tomb that may never be found, yet simultaneously beckon the curious to follow the coded trail, to confront history with intellect, courage, and imagination. The hunt continues, bridging millennia, guided by symbols that are as beautiful as they are mysterious, as protective as they are revealing, and as timeless as the ambition of the man they commemorate. The journey to uncover Alexander's tomb is not merely a physical quest. It is a journey through ritual, ceremony, and the sacred customs that surrounded death in the ancient world. Alexander himself was revered not just as a conqueror, but as a semi-divine figure, and his burial was likely conceived as an event of profound religious, political, and symbolic significance. Ancient writers hint at ceremonies that blended Greek, Egyptian, and Babylonian practices, creating a complex tapestry of ritual intended to honor, protect, and immortalize the king. In Egyptian tradition, death was not merely an ending, but a transition. The body was prepared with meticulous care, often accompanied by symbolic objects, spells, and sacred rituals designed to ensure passage to the afterlife. For Alexander, these rites would have been amplified by his status and the merging of multiple cultural influences. The Ptolemies, eager to consolidate power and align themselves with divinity, likely orchestrated a procession that was both grandiose and strategically designed to convey legitimacy. Every movement, every object, every ceremonial act would have been layered with meaning, intended to preserve the king's memory for eternity. Greek rituals added another dimension. In addition to honoring the dead, They emphasized heroism, virtue, and the enduring legacy of the individual. Alexander's companions, the Diadochi, may have contributed to these rites, arranging offerings, commemorations, and symbolic gestures that reflected both personal loyalty and political ambition. Funerary games, processions, and monuments could all have been part of a carefully choreographed ceremony that transformed death into legend. Every act became part of a narrative that reinforced Alexander's status, both divine and historical, creating a framework that would endure long after his body was laid to rest. Babylonian customs introduced yet more complexity. Astronomical alignments, temple rituals, and symbolic architecture all suggested that the placement of the tomb was as important as the tomb itself. Some texts hint at corridors aligned with celestial events, statues positioned to guide the soul, and cryptic carvings designed to encode knowledge. These elements transformed the tomb from a mere burial chamber into a ritualized environment, a sacred space that combined cosmology, theology, and political symbolism. For the ancients, the act of entering, navigating, or even seeing such a site was as spiritually consequential as the burial itself. Historical accounts describe ceremonies of staggering grandeur. Processions may have spanned cities, involving priests, soldiers, and common citizens, all participating in the reverence of a fallen hero whose presence had reshaped the known world. Gold, statues, and symbolic artifacts were reportedly employed, each carefully selected to communicate power, divinity, and memory. Yet even these accounts are shrouded in mystery. Some suggest that Ptolemy or later custodians may have deliberately altered the ceremonies, shifting locations or misdirecting observers to protect the tomb from looters or rival powers. The rituals, therefore, are not just historical footnotes. They're strategic instruments, merging devotion with secrecy. The psychological impact of these rituals cannot be underestimated. The grandeur, symbolism, and secrecy surrounding Alexander's burial created an aura of awe and fear, reinforcing his semi-divine status. Observers, whether ancient or modern, are confronted with a dual sense of wonder and dread. The tomb, if it exists, is not merely a place of death, but a stage upon which human ambition, devotion, and fear converge. Each element of the ritual serves both to honor Alexander and to test the resolve and comprehension of those who might seek to find him in death, preserving the mystery across generations. Modern explorers and scholars attempt to reconstruct these rituals through texts, artifacts, and symbolic patterns. Funerary monuments, cryptic inscriptions, and ceremonial layouts offer tantalizing hints, though gaps remain. Researchers hypothesize that ritual pathways may have been deliberately designed to mislead intruders while guiding initiates. Temples, walls, and corridors could have been oriented to align with celestial events or sacred symbols, creating a multi-layered puzzle that blends spirituality, politics, and secrecy. Understanding these rituals is crucial to interpreting both the physical and symbolic traces of Alexander's tomb, revealing a civilization where death, power, and mystery are inextricably linked. The legends surrounding the rituals enhance the cinematic tension of the search. Some accounts speak of secret passageways accessible only to priests or chosen officials, of ceremonial objects hidden beneath layers of stone, or of sacred rites performed to preserve the tomb's secrecy. Each story contributes to the mythology, creating an aura of danger, reverence, and mystery that has persisted for over 2 millennia. The rituals themselves become characters in the narrative, shaping human behavior, influencing decisions, and guarding the tomb against both curiosity and greed. Emotionally, The rituals illustrate the convergence of human desire and fear. They reveal a society deeply invested in legacy, devoted to preserving memory, and willing to intertwine complexity, secrecy, and artistry to protect what it valued most. For the audience, understanding these ceremonies is to glimpse the worldview of a civilization that revered the dead, feared intrusion, and sought to encode meaning across time. It is a lesson in both devotion and strategy, showing that the tomb of Alexander, if it exists, was not left to chance, but deliberately crafted as a test, a treasure, and a legend. By the end of this section, viewers sense that the tomb is more than a burial site. It is a sacred puzzle, a convergence of politics, spirituality, and psychology. The ancient rituals, layered with symbolism and strategic misdirection, reinforce the idea that Alexander's final resting place was designed to endure both physically and conceptually. The tomb, obscured by time, ritual, and ambition, challenges every seeker to understand not just where Alexander lies, but why, and to navigate the delicate interplay of power, devotion, and secrecy that has preserved this enigma for over 2,000 years. The story of these rituals leaves the audience with a haunting sense of the tomb's grandeur and mystery. Every step, every object, every pattern is imbued with purpose, waiting for the right observer to decode its meaning. And as modern explorers, scholars, and dreamers continue the search, the rituals remain a bridge across millennia, connecting the ambitions of an ancient king with the curiosity, courage, and imagination of every seeker who dares to follow in his footsteps. Beneath the bustling streets of Alexandria, beneath layers of history buried by millennia of construction and decay, lie the whispers of hidden corridors and forgotten landmarks. These secret pathways, some partially documented and others lost entirely, have tantalized explorers and scholars for centuries. Each discovery, however small, fuels speculation about the tomb of Alexander the Great, suggesting that its concealment was deliberate, meticulous, and designed to survive both human ambition and the passage of time. Ancient city planners, aware of the political and symbolic importance of Alexander's final resting place, may have constructed elaborate subterranean networks. Some corridors reportedly connected temples, palaces, and public spaces, creating controlled routes for ceremonial processions. Others may have served as hidden channels, designed to mislead intruders while preserving the sanctity of the tomb. Modern excavations have uncovered remnants of such passages, arched doorways, blocked corridors, and tunnels that suddenly vanish beneath rubble, but none have yet revealed definitive evidence of the tomb. Each fragment hints at a grander design, a labyrinth of secrecy that transcends mere architecture. Lost landmarks add another layer of intrigue. Statues, obelisks, and monuments, many destroyed or relocated over centuries, were often aligned with symbolic or celestial patterns. Ancient texts hint that some of these markers may have been intended as guides, directing initiates toward hidden chambers or secret entrances. Explorers have searched for such markers for centuries, using old maps, historical accounts, and even local oral traditions. In some cases, partial alignments have been identified, suggesting that the ancients employed a combination of geometry, astronomy, and sacred design to protect the tomb. The psychological complexity of these hidden corridors and landmarks is profound. They are not simply practical tools for concealment. They are part of a broader strategy to test those who seek Alexander's final resting place. Only those who possess the intelligence, intuition, and patience to interpret the clues correctly would navigate the labyrinth successfully. This design transforms the tomb from a static resting place into an interactive enigma, where human curiosity, intellect, and resolve are constantly measured against the ingenuity of its creators. Historical accounts hint at multiple possible entrances. Ptolemy, Alexander's successor and custodian of his body, may have overseen the construction of secret chambers and decoy corridors to protect the tomb from rival generals and opportunistic looters. Descriptions of processions suggest that the burial site was designed to impress observers while simultaneously concealing its true location. Scholars believe that even seemingly insignificant landmarks, an oddly positioned pillar, a partially destroyed gate, or a solitary statue, may hold the key to understanding the tomb's design. Interpreting these signs requires not only archaeological expertise, but a deep understanding of symbolism, politics, and ritual from the ancient world. The human stories surrounding the search for these corridors are equally compelling. Explorers navigating Alexandria's underground ruins recount the eerie sensation of ancient presence, of shadows that seem to shift in the flickering light of torches. Some have reported doors leading to dead ends, false passages, or chambers filled with debris, a testament to the deliberate obfuscation that has preserved the tomb's secrecy. Others have encountered structural anomalies that hint at hidden spaces, leaving tantalizing possibilities just beyond reach. Each exploration combines discovery with frustration, echoing the centuries-old tension between ambition and the unknown. Natural forces have also played a role in concealing these corridors and landmarks. Earthquakes, floods, and urban development over millennia have altered the landscape, burying passages and monuments beneath sand, sediment, and construction. Alexandria itself has shifted geographically, with parts of the ancient city now submerged beneath the Mediterranean. Such changes compound the difficulty of locating the tomb, ensuring that even the most diligent explorers must contend with both human and environmental obstacles. The tomb, if it exists, is hidden not only by design, but by the relentless forces of nature. Modern technology offers new avenues for exploration. Ground-penetrating radar, sonar mapping, and 3D reconstruction allow archaeologists to detect anomalies beneath the surface. Satellite imaging can reveal subtle patterns in city grids or terrain that might indicate buried structures. Yet even with these tools, the task remains daunting. Layers of debris, deliberate concealment, and centuries of natural and human activity obscure the clues, creating a puzzle that demands both scientific rigor and imaginative interpretation. The interplay of history, architecture, and symbolism ensures that every discovery is provisional, every lead tentative, and every corridor a potential gateway, or a dead end. Emotionally, these hidden corridors and lost landmarks magnify the allure of Alexander's tomb. They are not merely physical obstacles. They are manifestations of human ingenuity, foresight, and devotion. The ancients understood that the tomb was more than a resting place. It was a symbol, a narrative, and a test. Those who navigate the maze are participating in a story that spans millennia, confronting the same challenges, ambitions, and curiosities that have driven humanity to search for greatness. The journey through corridors and the study of landmarks becomes an exploration of both history and human nature. By the end of this section, the audience perceives that Alexander's tomb is both a physical and conceptual labyrinth. Every hidden corridor, every partially destroyed landmark, and every architectural anomaly contributes to a puzzle that blends politics, ritual, and symbolism. The tomb exists as much in imagination and legend as in stone and earth, compelling explorers and viewers alike to confront questions of legacy, ambition, and mortality. The search is not merely about discovery. It is a dialogue with the past, a confrontation with the minds of those who created a secret designed to endure across millennia. In these shadows, the tomb persists. Every stone, tunnel, and landmark is a testament to the ingenuity, reverence, and secrecy that define the ancient custodians of Alexander's legacy. And as modern seekers continue to trace hidden corridors and interpret lost markers, the audience is left with a sense of suspense, awe, and the realization that the tomb, whether found or forever concealed, remains one of history's most enduring enigmas. Across the vast expanse of Egyptian sands and the submerged ruins of Alexandria, legends whisper of treasures that once rested beside the body of Alexander the Great. These are not ordinary treasures of gold or gem, but symbols of empire, devotion, and divine ambition. Artifacts said to embody the convergence of human glory and mythic reverence. Each fragment of rumor, each relic unearthed or imagined, adds another layer to the myth, transforming the tomb into more than a burial chamber. It becomes a treasury of the human spirit itself. Historians and chroniclers from antiquity described Alexander's body as being encased in gold, sealed within an elaborate sarcophagus of translucent material, possibly glass or alabaster. Over this gleamed intricate engravings depicting his victories, celestial motifs, and emblems of gods he claimed as kin. Around him, it was said, lay offerings from across the known world. Persian armor, Indian ivory, Macedonian weapons, Greek statuary, and Egyptian talismans. Each object was not only a tribute, but a declaration, an acknowledgement that Alexander was both man and myth, conqueror and deity, mortal yet eternal. When the Ptolemies took control of Egypt, they transformed the tomb into a shrine of statecraft. Envoys from foreign lands visited not only to honor Alexander, but to acknowledge the legitimacy of those who ruled in his name. Ancient accounts tell of processions that passed through halls lined with treasures, crowns, shields, golden urns, and statues crafted by the finest artisans of Greece and Egypt alike. Even the air, they said, shimmered with the scent of sacred oils and incense burned continuously to maintain the sanctity of the site. These rituals ensured that Alexander's presence remained alive, a constant reminder of divine kingship. But time and human ambition are relentless. Wars swept through the empire, and new dynasties sought the legitimacy that possession of Alexander's remains could confer. Each transfer, each disturbance of the tomb, invited both reverence and plunder. Gold was melted, relics were taken as trophies, and the once sacred offerings began to scatter across continents. Some were said to have found their way into Roman treasuries, others hidden within temples, still others lost to shipwrecks along the Nile Delta. The treasures of the tomb thus became a story of dispersal, fragments of a broken constellation whose pieces may yet lie buried beneath the shifting sands or the dark waters of the Mediterranean. Archaeologists have long sought these relics, guided by fragments of text, artistic depictions, and chance discoveries. In 1907, workers in Qom el-Dika unearthed golden ornaments and fragments of marble carved in the Hellenistic style, sparking speculation that they once adorned the tomb precinct. Subsequent digs revealed more artifacts, Greek amphorae, coins bearing Alexander's likeness, and ceremonial vessels whose craftsmanship bore unmistakable Macedonian influence. None could be definitively linked to the tomb, yet each find deepened the mystery, hinting that beneath Alexandria's chaotic layers of history, treasures of immense symbolic power might still sleep undisturbed. The significance of these treasures is not purely material. For ancient civilizations, Gold and jewels were vessels of divine essence, believed to carry spiritual power. The objects buried with Alexander were chosen not for their opulence, but for their meaning. A shield from Persia symbolized conquest. A ring from Babylon represented destiny. A diadem from Egypt proclaimed divinity. Together, they formed a narrative, a physical manifestation of Alexander's journey from mortal general to god-king. If rediscovered today, these artifacts would not merely enrich museums. They would challenge the very boundary between legend and recorded history. Legends from later centuries complicate the story further. Medieval Arabic manuscripts mention a chamber of the Shining King, buried beneath the foundations of an old mosque, where golden statues guarded a crystal coffin. In the Middle Ages, European travelers spoke of seeing relics in Cairo that locals claimed were offerings from the tomb. Even Renaissance scholars were fascinated by these accounts, sketching imagined reconstructions of the burial chamber. Vast halls illuminated by oil lamps, walls inlaid with lapis lazuli, and treasures so numerous that they defy description. Whether these accounts were inspired by myth or distant memory, they reveal how deeply the idea of Alexander's buried wealth penetrated the imagination of humankind. Beneath these stories lies a poignant truth. The treasures matter less for their material value than for what they represent. They are tokens of human longing, the need to preserve greatness, to give permanence to a life that transcended mortality. The golden artifacts, the weapons, the sacred vessels, all are symbols of an age's desire to capture eternity in matter. In this sense, even the act of searching for them becomes a ritual, a continuation of the ancient devotion that once filled the tomb with offerings. Today, as archaeologists probe the ruins of Alexandria with advanced technologies, the question of the treasures remains open. Sonar scans reveal anomalies beneath submerged ruins. Radar detects voids that may hide chambers. Fragments of marble and gold continue to surface in unexpected places. Yet the true treasure may not be a golden sarcophagus or jeweled diadem, but the enduring mystery itself. Each discovery, real or imagined, sustains humanity's dialogue with the past, a conversation that has lasted more than 2 millennia. If the tomb were ever to be found intact, its treasures would do more than illuminate the life of a single man. They would bridge civilizations, Greek, Egyptian, Persian, and beyond, revealing how cultures intertwined to create a shared myth of greatness. They would testify to the ancient belief that glory, once achieved, could be immortalized in gold, stone, and story. And yet, paradoxically, the longer the tomb remains hidden, the more powerful that myth becomes. The unseen treasures beneath the sand continue to shimmer in the collective imagination, untouched by time, eternal in mystery. As the camera fades, the audience is left not with the glitter of gold, but with the haunting awareness that the true treasure lies in the quest itself, in the persistence of memory, the endurance of legend, and the undying fascination with a man whose empire once spanned the world. The treasures of Alexander are not lost. They live in every retelling, every excavation, and every heartbeat that still echoes with the dream of finding what was meant to remain forever hidden. In the centuries following Alexander's death, his legacy transformed from memory to myth, from mortal history to divine narrative. To his followers, he had not simply conquered the world. He had redefined what it meant to be human. The tomb in Alexandria became the axis of a new spiritual order, a place where faith and ambition intertwined, and where the line between religion and politics dissolved into reverence. Here, in marble halls lit by oil lamps and echoing chants, the cult of Alexander the Divine King was born. It began quietly, almost inevitably, Even during his lifetime, Alexander had encouraged comparisons to gods: Zeus, Ammon, Heracles, even Dionysus. His triumphal processions through Egypt, Persia, and India were more than celebrations. They were rituals of deification. By the time of his death, the notion that he was a child of the gods had taken root across continents. So when his body was brought to Egypt, it was not merely to be entombed, but to be enshrined. The conqueror had become the bridge between heaven and earth. In the generations that followed, this belief crystallized into a formal cult. The Ptolemies, ever aware of the power of myth, cultivated Alexander's divinity as a cornerstone of their own rule. Priests were appointed to his service. Processions were held on his birthday, where golden effigies of the conqueror were carried through Alexandria's streets amid incense, music, and the chanting of hymns. Citizens offered garlands at his shrine, petitioning the spirit of the great king for protection, prosperity, and guidance. To kneel before the tomb was to kneel before the idea of unity, the dream of one world under one divine ruler. Descriptions from the ancient world suggest that the rituals surrounding Alexander's tomb were elaborate and deeply symbolic. Within the sacred precinct, priests clad in white linen would anoint the sealed sarcophagus with sacred oils, whispering invocations that blended Greek and Egyptian tongues. Offerings of wine and honey were poured upon the marble floor, their scent rising into the air like a bridge between realms. Music filled the chamber, soft flutes and harps echoing like distant thunder. And at the heart of it all, the image of Alexander gleamed in the candlelight, serene, unyielding, divine. Over time, the cult expanded beyond Egypt. Temples dedicated to Alexander appeared in Greece, Asia Minor, and even as far east as Babylon. Soldiers and philosophers alike made pilgrimages to Alexandria, seeking inspiration, healing, or prophecy. Some claim that dreams within the tomb precinct brought visions of the king himself, radiant and silent, offering counsel through symbols and gestures rather than words. To the faithful, these encounters were proof that Alexander had not died, but ascended, his spirit residing in the very stones of the city he founded. But not all were content with this blending of godhood and manhood. Philosophers debated whether such worship was blasphemy or enlightenment. The Stoics condemned it as hubris. The Platonists saw in Alexander the ideal philosopher-king, the embodiment of divine reason. Meanwhile, the rulers of Egypt embraced the cult's power with calculated devotion, ensuring that Alexander's divinity reinforced their own. Every priestly ritual was a performance of continuity, a declaration that the bloodline of divinity still pulsed through their veins. As centuries passed, the rituals changed, becoming more esoteric and hidden. The Roman emperors, too, paid homage at the tomb, seeking legitimacy in its sacred aura. Julius Caesar wept upon seeing the body of his hero, while Augustus laid a golden crown upon the sarcophagus and removed the seal of its casing to gaze upon the preserved face within. Later emperors would follow suit, not merely as admirers, but as successors in divine lineage. The cult thus transcended its origins, merging with the imperial ideology of Rome. To rule, it seemed, one had to first acknowledge the man who had conquered eternity. Yet even as worship flourished, the shadows around the tomb deepened. Secret sects began to emerge, mystics and initiates who claimed access to hidden chambers beneath the shrine, where deeper rites were performed. These rituals, according to scattered texts and inscriptions, invoked Alexander not just as a god, but as an intermediary spirit, a being capable of guiding souls through death and rebirth. For them, the tomb was a portal between worlds. The golden relics above were mere symbols, The true treasure lay in communion with the immortal soul of the king. One papyrus fragment from the 2nd century BCE speaks cryptically of a light beneath the stone, suggesting an underground sanctuary lit by eternal flame. Archaeologists believe this could refer to an antechamber where initiates underwent purification rituals, fasting, chanting, and drinking sacred infusions designed to induce visions. To those who emerged, the experience was transformative. They claimed to feel Alexander's presence within them, as if his ambition, courage, and will have been passed into their own blood. In this way, the cult perpetuated not only memory, but transformation. To worship Alexander was to absorb a fragment of his divine fire. The early Christians, arriving centuries later, viewed the cult as both rival and prophecy. Some church fathers denounced it as pagan idolatry. Others saw in Alexander a foreshadowing of Christ, a mortal who sought divinity through unity. As the tides of faith shifted, the rituals faded, and the tomb's sanctity became a relic of a vanishing age. Yet even in its decline, the legend endured. Pilgrims continued to visit in secret, leaving small offerings at the sealed doors of the shrine, whispering prayers for strength, vision, or victory. By the time the Arab conquests reached Egypt, the cult had dissolved into myth. The once golden corridors were silent. The hymns no longer echoed. And yet, in local folklore, the tomb remained a place of power. Some called it the house of the king who never dies, others, the well of eternity. These whispers carried through centuries, surviving in stories told by traders, sailors, and dreamers. The divine king had vanished, but his shadow still ruled the imagination. Even now, the legacy of that ancient cult lingers in modern minds. Every new discovery, every excavation near Alexandria, rekindles the old belief that perhaps somewhere beneath the city, the divine king still lies in watchful sleep. The rituals may have ceased, but the devotion endures, transformed into the unending search itself. For to seek Alexander's tomb is, in a way, to continue the worship, to acknowledge that some legends are too vast, too luminous, to ever truly fade. As the dawn of new faiths swept across the ancient world, the tomb of Alexander began to fade, not through natural decay, but through deliberate silence. What had once been a beacon of divine kingship was now an uncomfortable relic of a pagan age, a symbol of ambition and godhood that no longer fit the rising order. The story of the tomb's disappearance is, in truth, a story of transformation. How belief reshapes memory and how power decides what history is allowed to remember. By the 4th century CE, Alexandria stood at the crossroads of worlds. The great city still glittered with the echoes of Hellenistic glory, its libraries, theaters, and temples. But beneath the surface, change was stirring. Christianity had taken root, spreading through its streets and academies, transforming hearts and hierarchies. The new faith, grounded in humility and salvation, clashed with the grandeur of the old gods. In this struggle of ideals, Alexander's tomb became a target, not of violence at first, but of reinterpretation. Church fathers, philosophers, and bishops began to rewrite the city's sacred geography. The shrines of Serapis, Isis, and Alexander were redefined, repurposed, or quietly condemned. What had been holy became heresy. What had been revered became dangerous. The cult of Alexander, once celebrated by kings and emperors, was now whispered about as superstition. Pilgrimages to the tomb grew fewer. The rituals ceased. The lamps that had burned for centuries were extinguished one by one. And with each darkened flame, a fragment of history disappeared. Some scholars believe the first act of erasure came not from destruction, but absorption. As Christian churches rose across Alexandria, many were built directly atop older sanctuaries. The logic was clear. By building over the past, the new faith could inherit its power while nullifying its presence. Archaeological records suggest that a large basilica dedicated to St. Mark may have been constructed over or near the original tomb precinct. If true, it would mean that the resting place of Alexander the Great lies beneath one of the holiest sites of early Christianity, hidden in plain sight, sealed beneath centuries of prayer. Yet the transition was not without resistance. There were still those who remembered the divine king as a hero, a unifier, a symbol of humanity's boundless potential. For them, the tomb was not a temple of false gods, but a monument to human greatness. Such reverence, however, was increasingly seen as heretical. To worship a mortal man was blasphemy. The writings of Christian theologians from the period describe Alexander as the proud conqueror whose soul sought heaven through arrogance. The message was clear. His legend was to be dismantled, his divinity denied, his memory purified by forgetting. In time, the new rulers of faith succeeded. The tomb's exact location, once known to every citizen of Alexandria, was lost within a generation. Its entrance sealed, its name omitted from maps and records. Travelers who once described the shrine with reverence now spoke of it as a myth. Only faint references remained, in sermons condemning idolatry, in scrolls warning against the worship of mortal kings, and in the fading memory of elders who had once seen the golden doors with their own eyes. Thus began one of history's greatest vanishing acts, the disappearance of the world's most famous tomb. But erasure did not end with Christianity. In the centuries that followed, as Islam rose across North Africa, the memory of Alexander underwent yet another transformation. The conqueror was not forgotten, but reborn under a new name, Iskandar Tulkarnain, the two-horned one. In the Quran, this mysterious figure appears not as a mere warrior, but as a righteous ruler guided by God. To many scholars, this was Alexander rebaptized, not condemned, but sanctified anew. Yet even this reinterpretation added distance between man and monument. The physical tomb no longer mattered. What endured was the story, now woven into the moral fabric of faith. The Muslim chroniclers who visited Alexandria's centuries later wrote of ruins that stirred the imagination but defied certainty. Some claimed to have seen a sealed crypt beneath a mosque. Others spoke of subterranean chambers where light filtered through marble slabs. None could say for sure what lay beneath. One 9th-century traveler described being led by locals to a buried palace where the air is heavy and the silence divine. He claimed it was Alexander's resting place, though no proof was found. Whether this was legend, dream, or memory, it shows that even after erasure, the echo persisted. What makes this story haunting is not only the loss of a monument, but the deliberate nature of that loss. The tomb was not destroyed by time. It was hidden by belief. Every empire that rose after Alexander inherited a piece of his myth, but none could tolerate the whole of it. To preserve their own faiths, they had to bury his. The conqueror who had once sought to unite the world under a single vision had, in death, become too powerful to exist. The safest place for his memory was underground. And yet, there's an irony here. By erasing the tomb, the new faiths gave birth to an even greater mystery. What is unseen becomes sacred. What is lost becomes eternal. The hidden tomb became not a symbol of defeat, but of immortality. It lived on in whispers, in poetry, in the yearning of scholars who searched the city's depths by torchlight. It became, paradoxically, proof that Alexander had transcended the reach of mortals, that no faith, no empire, no rewriting of history could truly contain him. Today, as archaeologists probe beneath Alexandria's streets, they confront not just layers of sand and stone, but layers of ideology. The ruins they unearth tell a story written by faith and fear, by reverence and revision. Somewhere beneath churches, mosques, and modern buildings, the king who once united the world may still lie entombed in silence. His presence erased from history's pages, yet indelibly carved into its soul. And so, the question remains, did faith protect his body, or did it bury the truth? Was the tomb lost by accident, or by design? The erasure of Alexander's tomb reminds us that history is not merely a record of what happened. It is a living thing, shaped by belief, guarded by silence, and haunted by what it chooses to forget. For centuries after the tomb's disappearance, whispers of its existence never died. Instead, they spread like fire through the corridors of medieval imagination, among monks, travelers, and secret orders who saw in the lost resting place of Alexander not merely a historical puzzle, but a gateway to forbidden knowledge. In an age when myth and faith interwove seamlessly, the search for the tomb became a spiritual quest, a test of devotion, and for some, an obsession that consumed lifetimes. The conqueror who had once united the living world now ruled over a kingdom of mystery, and those who sought him were drawn by a strange mixture of reverence and hunger. The first recorded resurgence of interest came during the Byzantine era. Scholars in Constantinople, leafing through the fading manuscripts of earlier ages, stumbled upon cryptic references to the tomb of the sun-born king. These texts spoke of a sealed chamber beneath the great city of the West, guarded by marble lions and inscribed with verses that only the wise could interpret. Some believed it described the tomb of Alexander. Others thought it a metaphor. But to those who yearned for the truth, it was an invitation. Byzantine chroniclers record that several expeditions set out for Alexandria during the 9th and 10th centuries, each claiming to have found traces, a collapsed tunnel here, an ancient vault there, but none returned with proof. Still, the legend grew. By the time the Crusades reshaped the world, the legend of the lost tomb had taken on a life of its own. Among knights and scholars of the Latin West, Alexander's name carried both reverence and warning. He was the archetype of conquest, blessed by destiny, cursed by pride. Some crusaders saw him as a proto-Christian hero, a man who spread civilization to the heathen East. Others viewed him as a rival to the saints, a pagan emperor whose spirit haunted the lands they sought to claim. And so, as armies marched across deserts and oceans, tales of the hidden tomb traveled with them. Tales of golden chambers, eternal lamps, and scrolls of forgotten wisdom sealed beside the king's mummified form. The Knights Templar, in particular, became entangled in these myths. Secret chronicles and apocryphal letters suggest that during their campaigns in Egypt and Syria, certain Templar envoys were drawn to Alexandria not only for trade or diplomacy, but for a purpose unspoken. Some medieval sources claim the Templars recovered fragments of an ancient map depicting subterranean passages beneath the city, tunnels that led to the house of the great king. Whether these claims were invention or truth is unknown. But within the cryptic symbolism of Templar lore, the idea of a buried ruler guarding the wisdom of the ages fits perfectly. For the Templars, knowledge was treasure, and the tomb of Alexander was said to hold both. Across the Islamic world, too, scholars and mystics pondered the fate of the great conqueror. In Persian manuscripts, Alexander, Iskandar, was depicted not merely as a warrior, but as a philosopher king, guided by divine vision. Poets like Ferdowsi and Nizami wove elaborate tales of his travels to the ends of the earth, his encounters with the waters of life, and his quest for immortality. Within these stories lay veiled references to his resting place, an underground city of glass and light, guarded by spirits of flame. To Sufi mystics, the tomb symbolized the inward journey of the soul, a descent into darkness to discover divine illumination. Thus, the search for the physical tomb was mirrored by a search for spiritual truth. During the Renaissance, the legend resurfaced again, now refracted through the lens of science and exploration. European humanists, rediscovering the ancient world, scoured classical texts for clues. In dusty monasteries, they found maps, letters, and fragments of lost works describing the city of Alexander and its wonders. One Florentine scholar, Giovanni Nardi, wrote of visiting Egypt in 1498 and being shown an ancient door beneath the sands, upon which the name of the great Macedonian was once inscribed. He was told by locals that it led to the sleeping king, though the passage had long been sealed by floods. Whether this was truth or a mirage conjured by Alexandria's layered myths, it reignited Europe's fascination with the lost tomb. As centuries passed, explorers, treasure hunters, and mystics each took up the trail. In the 18th and 19th centuries, when archaeology began to replace legend with science, the search became more systematic. Yet even then, mystery prevailed. Napoleon Bonaparte, during his Egyptian campaign, was said to have ordered his scholars to find Alexander's tomb. Some claimed they did, that they uncovered fragments of marble sarcophagi and inscriptions referring to the son of Zeus Ammon. But if such discoveries occurred, they were either lost or hidden, their details buried amid the chaos of war and empire. The secrecy surrounding Napoleon's findings only deepened the enigma, giving rise to theories that the conqueror had rediscovered the tomb and chosen to keep it secret. Through every era, the pattern remained the same: revelation followed by silence. Each supposed discovery was shadowed by disappearance, as if the tomb itself rejected exposure. Some believe this was divine will, that the resting place of Alexander was protected by forces unseen. Others suggested more earthly motives: political suppression, theft, or the simple fear of disturbing a legend too great to handle. For the seekers, this elusiveness was both curse and allure. To find Alexander's tomb meant to claim a fragment of immortality. To fail was to be consumed by the same ambition that had defined the man himself. And so the legend survived, not through confirmation, but through the persistence of those who refused to let it die. From Byzantine monks to Renaissance scholars, from mystics to military leaders, each generation added its own layer to the myth. Each left behind journals, sketches, and rumors, forming a mosaic of obsession that spanned continents and centuries. The tomb remained hidden, yet never forgotten, its absence more powerful than its presence. Even now, as modern archaeologists probe beneath Alexandria with sonar, satellite imagery, and radar, they follow the footsteps of those ancient seekers. They chase a ghost whose shadow grows only larger with time. And though they may claim to search for artifacts, perhaps what they truly seek is what those before them sought too: connection. The chance to touch, for a brief moment, the legend that refuses to rest. In the end, the story of the seekers is not about discovery. It is about longing, about humanity's refusal to accept that some mysteries are meant to remain unsolved. The lost tomb of Alexander is more than a burial site. It is a mirror of our own eternal curiosity, our defiance of forgetting, our hunger to uncover what the world has chosen to hide. The 19th century dawned with a hunger unlike any before, a hunger not merely for empire or trade, but for knowledge, discovery, and the recovery of lost glory. The Victorians lived in a time when history was no longer distant myth. It was a treasure waiting to be unearthed, catalogued, and conquered. And among all the lost wonders that haunted the imagination of scholars and explorers, none loomed larger than the tomb of Alexander the Great. It was not just a legend of marble and gold. It was the missing crown of civilization itself. To find it would be to complete the narrative of human ambition. By the 1800s, Alexandria had become a crossroads once more. Under British influence and archaeological curiosity, the city drew in a new breed of seekers, men who arrived not as conquerors, but as historians armed with compasses, notebooks, and dreams of immortality. The modern science of archaeology was in its infancy, but its practitioners saw themselves as heirs to the great explorers of old. They read ancient texts by torchlight and mapped the coastline where once Alexander's fleet had anchored. Every column and fragment buried in the sand whispered possibilities. The most persistent of these seekers was Giovanni Battista Caviglia, an Italian explorer who had already made his name excavating the pyramids. In 1821, he arrived in Alexandria determined to locate what he believed was the lost Soma, the body of Alexander himself. Guided by obscure references in Roman writings, Caviglia began digging near the old city center, close to the ancient necropolis. His workers unearthed fragments of sculpted granite, shattered columns, and an underground chamber sealed with stone. For a moment, he believed he had found it, but when the vault was opened, it revealed only the mummified remains of unknown priests. Still, he refused to give up. He wrote in his journal, "If the body of Alexander lies not here, then it sleeps beneath our very feet, deeper than time dares to remember." In London, word of his findings spread quickly. The British Museum, at the height of its collecting frenzy, began funding expeditions across Egypt, hoping to outdo the French in their archaeological triumphs. To the Victorians, ancient relics were not just artifacts. They were proof of civilization's linear progress, tokens of man's mastery over the past. But with that ambition came an undercurrent of mysticism. Many believed Alexander's tomb contained not only treasures, but forbidden knowledge, texts of lost philosophies, perhaps even the secret to his fabled preservation. Within the polished halls of Victorian salons, whispers grew that the tomb was hidden deliberately, protected by a curse that punished those who sought to disturb it. Among those captivated by the idea was the young scholar and adventurer Charles Kingsley, who once described Alexander as the link between man's will and God's silence. Kingsley joined an expedition to Egypt in the 1840s, recording his thoughts in letters filled with awe and unease. He described walking through the catacombs beneath Alexandria, where shadows seemed to move on their own. "I felt," he wrote, "as if the air itself remembered him." His group uncovered ancient marble fragments inscribed with the letters Alex, though the remainder was lost to erosion. To Kingsley, it was a sign. To his peers, it was coincidence. But such coincidences were the kindling of obsession. As the century advanced, the race to find the tomb became almost theatrical. Rival scholars issued competing claims, each declaring they had identified the site. Some pointed to the old Serapeum, arguing it once housed the relics of the conqueror before being converted into a Christian shrine. Others turned to the district now buried under the modern city, where legends spoke of a crypt sealed after a great earthquake. In 1850, a French archaeologist named Ambrose Mariette claimed to have discovered a sarcophagus of extraordinary craftsmanship bearing Greek inscriptions. But when the chamber collapsed during excavation, all evidence was lost. The fragments that survived vanished into private collections. Some said they were later displayed in a secret wing of the Louvre, labeled only as unknown royal. Meanwhile, in Cairo and Alexandria alike, local Egyptian guides told tales to curious Europeans, stories passed down through generations about a sleeping king beneath the streets. Some described glowing vaults glimpsed during earthquakes, or doors that appeared and vanished overnight. To modern scholars, these were fables. But to the Victorians who balanced science with superstition, they were tantalizing clues. Even Queen Victoria herself was said to have taken an interest in the mystery after reading accounts of the Macedonian pharaoh. The British press sensationalized every rumor, turning the search for the tomb into a public fascination that blended empire, romance, and archaeology into one irresistible myth. Behind closed doors, however, darker stories circulated. In 1866, an anonymous letter appeared in the London Chronicle, allegedly written by a British officer stationed in Egypt. The author claimed to have been invited to a secret viewing of a royal mummy of unusual preservation, kept in a hidden chamber within a colonial administrative building. He wrote that the face bore a faint resemblance to classical busts of Alexander. The report was swiftly dismissed as fantasy, yet it reawakened rumors that the tomb, or at least the body, had been found long ago, spirited away to prevent political or religious unrest. Some even claimed the mummy later surfaced in the British Museum, mislabeled as a Ptolemaic noble. No proof ever emerged, but the rumor refused to die. As the century neared its end, Alexandria had changed once more, a city of electric lights and modern streets overlaying layers of forgotten grandeur. Yet beneath its new facade, the same silence lingered. Archaeologists now spoke less of discovery and more of loss. Every new building uncovered ancient stones. Every trench whispered of something deeper. The dream of finding Alexander's tomb had become a mirror reflecting the Victorian age itself, driven, confident, but haunted by its own shadow. For all their progress and reason, they could not command the past to reveal its final secret. When the 20th century dawned, the explorers of the empire left behind dusty journals, broken tools, and fragments of marble whose inscriptions led nowhere. The tomb remained elusive, as if mocking those who had tried to claim it. Yet their failures did not end the legend. Instead, they preserved it, ensuring that each unanswered question carried forward into a new era of seekers who would continue the search with even greater precision, and perhaps with a little less arrogance. The Victorians had turned a myth into a mission, and in doing so, they had built a bridge between ancient wonder and modern science. Though they found no tomb, they uncovered something far greater, the realization that history's deepest mysteries are not meant to be conquered, but to be listened to patiently, reverently, as one might listen to the voice of the dead beneath the sand. By the dawn of the 20th century, Alexandria stood at a strange crossroads, half ancient memory, half modern metropolis. The Victorians had come and gone, leaving behind more questions than answers, and the city itself seemed to have swallowed their ambitions. Yet even as the world turned toward industry and war, whispers of the hidden tomb refused to die. Beneath the hum of trams and the call of the harbor, beneath the villas and cafes of a Europeanized Egypt, there lay another Alexandria, a buried labyrinth of stone and silence. It was said that the true city, the one Alexander himself had planned, still slept beneath the modern streets, undisturbed since the time of Cleopatra. And somewhere in that forgotten maze, the conqueror himself still rested. The early decades of the new century brought a new kind of explorer, the archaeologist armed, not with legend, but with method. Egyptology had matured into a science, and excavation had become a discipline guided by careful records rather than romantic chance. Yet even in this era of rationalism, the hunt for Alexander's tomb drew figures whose motives were anything but purely academic. Scholars, soldiers, adventurers, and even spies converged on Alexandria, each chasing their own interpretation of the myth. They came from universities, from colonial offices, and sometimes from organizations that preferred not to be named at all. In 1912, the Greek archaeologist Achille Adriani began mapping the catacombs of Qom el-Shokhafa, uncovering a sprawling necropolis that blended Greek, Egyptian, and Roman motifs in surreal harmony. He believed these hybrid designs reflected the lingering cultural shadow of Alexander himself, a city where East met West, and where the conqueror's influence lived on, even in death. But Adriani also noted something odd. Several tunnels sealed with limestone slabs bore markings unlike any others in the complex. He theorized that deeper chambers might exist below, unreachable with the tools of the time. In his notes, later discovered in the archives of the University of Athens, he wrote, "There are doors beneath the doors, and perhaps beyond them, the true heart of this city." Then came the Great War. Alexandria became a strategic port, and the ruins once explored by dreamers were now occupied by soldiers. Bombs fell, trenches were dug, and ancient corridors collapsed under the vibrations of artillery. Yet amid the chaos, a few officers stationed in Egypt kept alive the old fascination. In 1918, British intelligence reportedly stumbled upon sealed catacombs during a military fortification project. Rumors spread that they had discovered a chamber lined with gold leaf and inscriptions in Greek and Egyptian. The find was swiftly classified and the area sealed off. After the war, official records of that excavation vanished, leaving behind only the faintest mention in military correspondence. A curious note that read, "Unusual structure, deep level, possible historical significance. Access restricted." As peace returned, the city grew again. Streets were repaved, buildings rose higher, and layers of history were buried deeper still. By the 1930s, Alexandria had become a cosmopolitan port, a place where poets, diplomats, and smugglers mingled in seaside cafes, each unaware they were drinking above the bones of empires. But not everyone forgot. In 1933, a Polish engineer named Kazimierz Michalowski began a detailed survey of the ancient city using early aerial photography. His images revealed anomalies in the urban layout, subtle alignments invisible from the ground. Beneath the central district, he detected what appeared to be a large rectangular foundation far larger than any known temple. He published his findings quietly, suggesting it might have been part of the original Soma, the royal quarter that housed the body of Alexander. The paper was ignored by most historians, overshadowed by Europe's march toward another war. But decades later, his data would be revisited, and it would ignite a new wave of obsession. World War II once again brought devastation. Alexandria became a naval stronghold, and the digging of bunkers and fortifications unearthed fragments of antiquity. Marble columns, pottery, even fragments of mosaics depicting lions and thunderbolts, the old symbols of Alexander's empire. Local laborers told stories of chambers uncovered and hastily reburied, of military engineers finding walls carved with Greek script, only to have their discoveries confiscated. In one account, an officer described a stone sarcophagus unearthed near the ruined Nebi Daniel, a site long rumored to have been near the royal quarter. The sarcophagus was empty, but the workers swore they saw faint inscriptions reading Alexandros. The British military sealed the site within days. It was later transformed into a government storage depot, erasing all traces of the find. After the war, as Egypt moved toward independence, archaeology shifted from colonial hands to national pride. Egyptian scholars began reclaiming the narrative of their own history. Among them was a young archaeologist named Mahmud el-Falaki, whose detailed urban maps of ancient Alexandria became legendary. He spent years reconstructing the lost cities, planned using both ancient texts and field surveys. His conclusion was electrifying. The original royal district, including the Soma, lay not along the modern coast, but buried deep under layers of later construction. He even pinpointed a likely location, an area beneath the Latin Patriarchate, close to where the Rue Rosette now stood. If the tomb exists, he wrote in 1952, it sleeps there between stone and shadow. His report gained attention briefly, then mysteriously disappeared from circulation. The 1960s brought new tools, sonar mapping, underwater archaeology, and early geophysical scans. Explorers now realized that much of ancient Alexandria had sunk beneath the waves due to centuries of earthquakes and subsidence. Divers discovered colossal statues, temple fragments, and drowned streets. But the deeper they searched, the more complex the picture became. Some believed Alexander's body had been moved during late antiquity to a safer place inland, perhaps even to the desert oases. Others claimed the tomb was now part of the submerged royal quarter itself, lost forever beneath the Mediterranean. The dream of discovery shifted once more from sand to sea. And yet, for every theory disproved, another emerged. Reports surfaced of sealed tunnels beneath churches, basements that descended into stone corridors, whispers of doors that led to nothing but silence. Locals told of nights when tremors revealed glimpses of marble walls before being swallowed again by the earth. Alexandria's identity had fused entirely with the myth. The city and the tomb were one, both layered, both elusive, both endlessly reborn from ruin. By the close of the 20th century, technology had advanced, but the mystery remained stubborn. Archaeologists with radar and satellite imaging searched block by block. Governments debated permissions. Theories multiplied, each as convincing and as uncertain as the last. Beneath the modern noise, the pulse of the ancient city continued, steady and patient. The conqueror still slept somewhere below, untouched by time or conquest, his legacy sealed behind the silence of stone. And as night fell over the glittering harbor, with ships drifting under the same stars Alexander once gazed upon, a haunting thought returned. Perhaps the tomb was never meant to be found. Perhaps the city itself had become his monument, a living memory built upon the ruins of his dream. The legend endured not because it waited to be proven, but because it reminded the world that even the greatest man who ever lived could disappear, leaving only the echo of his name carved into the bones of the city. By the final decade of the 20th century, the search for Alexander's tomb had become something more than an archaeological quest. It had become a global enigma, tangled in politics, pride, and secrecy. What began as the dream of conquerors and kings was now pursued by scientists armed with satellites and ground-penetrating radar, each hoping to lift the veil on one of history's most enduring mysteries. The world had grown smaller, but the secret of Alexander's resting place had only deepened. It seemed as though every layer of progress revealed a new layer of silence beneath it. In the 1990s, Egypt entered a new golden era of excavation. Under the leadership of ambitious scholars like Dr. Zahi Hawass, the country's archaeological frontiers expanded dramatically. The Valley of the Kings yielded fresh wonders. Ancient tombs reopened to breathe the desert air again. Yet in Alexandria, a different energy stirred, one not of discovery, but of restraint. The modern city was now densely built, its ancient core buried beneath centuries of concrete and commerce. Every excavation permit became a matter of politics. Every rumor of an ancient find drew immediate scrutiny from both the Egyptian government and foreign institutions. To search for Alexander was to navigate not only sand and stone, but bureaucracy, diplomacy, and quiet resistance. The most prominent figure to reignite the quest was Greek archaeologist Liana Savoltsi. In 1995, after years of research, she announced to the world that she had found Alexander's tomb, not in Alexandria, but in the Siwa oasis, far west of the Nile. Her claim electrified the media. The site contained a grand Hellenistic structure adorned with Macedonian motifs and Greek inscriptions referring to the son of Zeus Ammon. Savoltsi declared confidently that the tomb matched descriptions in ancient texts. But her announcement came at a sensitive moment in Egyptian-Greek relations. Cairo's Ministry of Antiquities quickly intervened, halting her excavation and accusing her of overstepping authority. Her research permits were revoked. The find was sealed off, and official statements downplayed its significance. What followed was a storm of accusations and academic silence. Savoltsi insisted she had been suppressed, that her discovery threatened national pride and international politics. "They don't want the world to know," she said in a televised interview, "because whoever holds Alexander's tomb holds a piece of history's soul." The controversy split the academic community. Some dismissed her claims as speculative. Others whispered that she had come too close to something real. Reports surfaced that Egyptian authorities quietly continued limited investigations of the Siwa site for several years, away from cameras. No definitive results were ever published. To this day, the complex remains officially unidentified. Those satellite images show continued structural preservation. It was as if the sands themselves had been ordered to keep the secret. Meanwhile, in Alexandria proper, technology opened new doors. The city's coastline, long eroded by earthquakes and tsunamis, became a focus of marine archaeologists who used sonar and robotic submersibles to scan the submerged royal quarter, the same area where Cleopatra's palace once stood. French archaeologist Frank Gaudio led the effort, uncovering massive statues, sphinxes, and the ruins of temples once dedicated to Isis and Osiris. Beneath the waves, the outlines of an ancient city emerged like a ghostly reflection. Yet even as diverse documented hundreds of relics, one thing remained absent: any trace of the Soma, the royal mausoleum. Gaudio himself admitted that if Alexander's tomb had once stood there, it had either collapsed beneath deeper strata or been moved long ago. "We are looking," he said, "for a shadow in a sea of shadows." But the modern age brought with it something new: conspiracy and information control. As Egypt modernized and foreign interests surged, excavation data became increasingly restricted. Leaked documents and unofficial footage began circulating online, showing chambers uncovered during infrastructure projects in downtown Alexandria. One such clip, allegedly filmed in 2008 by municipal workers, showed a stone chamber with reliefs depicting a lion and a thunderbolt, symbols closely linked to Alexander. Within hours of its upload, the video was removed, its uploader anonymous. Local sources claimed the site was immediately sealed by authorities under the guise of public safety. To many, it was proof that something extraordinary lay beneath the city, something too significant to expose. By the 2010s, digital archaeologists, independent researchers armed with online archives, declassified aerial photos, and 3D modeling began mapping possible locations. One recurring hotspot appeared beneath the Nabi Daniel Mosque, near the ancient royal quarter. Legends had long claimed that beneath this very mosque, a great tomb lay hidden, perhaps that of Alexander himself. Excavations there were strictly forbidden, as the site was considered sacred ground. Still, in 2019, an unverified account from a researcher claimed that ground-penetrating radar scans conducted near the mosque revealed a vast subsurface anomaly consistent with a large stone chamber. The claim was never officially acknowledged, and the research group quietly disbanded months later. Behind the scenes, tension grew between those who believed the tomb should remain undisturbed and those who saw it as humanity's rightful heritage. In 2021, a coalition of Greek and Egyptian historians proposed a joint excavation under the supervision of UNESCO, but the plan never moved forward. Officially, logistical issues prevented progress. Unofficially, whispers told a different story of power, control, and fear. What if, they said, the discovery of Alexander's true resting place reignited claims of ownership and identity between nations? What if it destabilized the careful myth each civilization had built around him? Even as modern technology expanded its reach, the mystery deepened. Thermal imaging from orbiting satellites revealed subtle temperature variations in Alexandria's old districts, signatures of possible underground voids. Artificial intelligence analyses of ancient city maps pointed to recurring alignments between temples, roadways, and administrative buildings, suggesting a central ceremonial axis, perhaps the very path that once led to the tomb. Yet, for all the tools humanity had gained, the silence beneath the streets remained absolute. Today, in the heart of modern Alexandria, glass towers and traffic lights glow above what may be the world's greatest secret. Tourists walk past the Nabi Daniel Mosque, unaware that only meters below them might lie the stone chamber where the conqueror rests, the body that once united East and West, the man whose death redefined empires. The wind from the harbor still carries salt, dust, and echoes of ages. Somewhere beneath, a chamber waits, perhaps empty, perhaps eternal. The 21st century has not solved the riddle of Alexander's tomb. It has only transformed it from an archaeological quest into a reflection of our collective yearning to connect with something immortal. We search because we need to believe that greatness leaves a trace, that beneath the noise of history, there remains one voice still unbroken. The legend continues not in the sand or the stone, but in the endless pursuit, in the human refusal to stop asking the question that has haunted the world for 2,000 years. Where does Alexander the Great truly sleep? The sun sinks low over the endless desert, casting long shadows across dunes that have swallowed entire civilizations. The wind carries with it whispers, faint echoes of voices, lost songs, forgotten prayers. Somewhere beneath this golden ocean lies the memory of empires that once ruled the world. The desert, in its vast silence, has become both their grave and their guardian. As the light fades, the shifting sands reveal fragments of the past, shards of pottery, weathered bones, inscriptions half buried by time. They tell a story not of sudden collapse, but of gradual surrender, of cities abandoned to drought, trade routes choked by shifting dunes, and once thriving kingdoms reduced to legend. Among the sands of the Sahara, explorers have unearthed evidence of lost rivers, now dry as bone, that once nourished green valleys and bustling settlements. The people who lived here did not imagine a barren land. They walked through fields of wheat, traded along lush corridors, and built temples that glittered under a friendlier sun. Yet as the climate shifted, the rains withdrew. Slowly, the green world died, leaving behind only traces that defy the imagination. The desert's advance was relentless, a silent force, reshaping both landscape and destiny. In Mesopotamia, too, the story was similar. Once called the cradle of civilization, the land between the Tigris and Euphrates turned against its creators. The irrigation systems that fed ancient Sumer and Babylon began to fail. Salt crept into the soil, crops withered, cities emptied, and the sound of hammers and prayers faded into the wind. Empires that once claimed eternity found themselves undone not by conquest, but by nature's quiet, inexorable hand. Even in Arabia's fabled Rub al-Khali, the empty quarter, travelers speak of ruins half-buried, the remains of Ubar, the Atlantis of the sands. Its story, whether myth or memory, echoes the same truth. The human greatness, no matter how luminous, is fleeting beneath the sky's eternal indifference. Each grain of sand carries within it a fragment of human hope, dreams reduced to dust, ambitions consumed by the same earth that once nurtured them. And yet, in the haunting beauty of these desolate expanses, there is something profoundly humbling. The desert reminds us that time is not cruel, only patient. It teaches that what we build will one day fall, what we conquer will one day be reclaimed, and what we remember will one day be forgotten. But perhaps that is the true poetry of existence, that even in erasure, there remains meaning. The whispering sands may bury the names of kings, but they cannot bury the essence of humanity, the will to create, to endure, and to dream beneath an indifferent sun. The sun sinks low over the endless desert, casting long shadows across dunes that have swallowed entire civilizations. The wind carries with it whispers, faint echoes of voices, lost songs, forgotten prayers. Somewhere beneath this golden ocean lies the memory of empires that once ruled the world. The desert, in its vast silence, has become both their grave and their guardian. As the light fades, the shifting sands reveal fragments of the past, shards of pottery, weathered bones, inscriptions half buried by time. They tell a story not of sudden collapse, but of gradual surrender, of cities abandoned to drought, trade routes choked by shifting dunes, and once thriving kingdoms reduced to legend. Among the sands of the Sahara, explorers have unearthed evidence of lost rivers, now dry as bone, that once nourished green valleys and bustling settlements. The people who lived here did not imagine a barren land. They walked through fields of wheat, traded along lush corridors, and built temples that glittered under a friendlier sun. Yet, as the climate shifted, the rains withdrew. Slowly, the green world died, leaving behind only traces that defy the imagination. The desert's advance was relentless, a silent force, reshaping both landscape and destiny. In Mesopotamia, too, the story was similar. Once called the cradle of civilization, the land between the Tigris and Euphrates turned against its creators. The irrigation systems that fed ancient Sumer and Babylon began to fail. Salt crept into the soil, crops withered, cities emptied, and the sound of hammers and prayers faded into the wind. Empires that once claimed eternity found themselves undone not by conquest, but by nature's quiet, inexorable hand. Even in Arabia's fabled Rub al-Khali, the empty quarter, travelers speak of ruins half-buried, the remains of Ubar, the Atlantis of the sands. Its story, whether myth or memory, echoes the same truth. The human greatness, no matter how luminous, is fleeting beneath the sky's eternal indifference. Each grain of sand carries within it a fragment of human hope, dreams reduced to dust, ambitions consumed by the same earth that once nurtured them. And yet, in the haunting beauty of these desolate expanses, there is something profoundly humbling. The desert reminds us that time is not cruel, only patient. It teaches that what we build will one day fall, what we conquer will one day be reclaimed, and what we remember will one day be forgotten. But perhaps that is the true poetry of existence, that even in erasure there remains meaning. The whispering sands may bury the names of kings, but they cannot bury the essence of humanity, the will to create, to endure, and to dream beneath an indifferent sun. Far beneath the restless tides, where sunlight fades into shifting blue twilight, lie the remnants of ancient forests that once stretched across lands now claimed by the sea. Their ghostly trunks stand like monuments in silence, coated with coral and seaweed, their roots entangled in centuries of sediment. These are not mere myths or the imagination of sailors. They are the true forests of the drowned world, places where trees once swayed in the wind, where birds sang, and where rivers carved paths through living green. Now, they exist only in the whispers of the currents and the flicker of fish weaving between their fallen limbs. Long ago, before the end of the last ice age, sea levels were hundreds of feet lower. The continents extended far beyond their current borders, and vast stretches of woodland connected what are now distant islands. People hunted there, gathered food, and watched the skies for signs of change. When the ice began to melt, the oceans rose slowly but relentlessly, swallowing valleys, plains, and forests alike. Generation after generation watched the waters creep closer, turning familiar ground into salt marsh, and salt marsh into sea. There were no sudden cataclysms, just an endless, rising hush as the waves took what had always seemed eternal. Off the coast of Britain, divers have found tree stumps preserved in the mud, still upright as they once grew. In the North Sea lies Doggerland, a lost country that once connected Britain to mainland Europe, a green world of rivers, meadows, and people now buried beneath the cold waves. Further south, in the Gulf of Mexico and the coast of Japan, other forests rest beneath the sea, some so well preserved that there would still smells faintly of pine when cut open. They are time capsules of an earth transformed, living proof that the boundaries we take for granted between land and ocean are fragile illusions. These submerged worlds are haunting not just because they are lost, but because they remind us how intimately the planet's breath affects our destiny. The rising seas that once consumed those forests are rising again today, driven not by melting glaciers alone, but by human hands that burn and build without restraint. The ocean is a patient archivist, recording every change, every shift in temperature, every echo of our choices. As the tide creeps higher along modern shores, it is as if the ghosts of those ancient trees whisper their warning. The sea always remembers, and it always returns. Yet there is also beauty in this cycle of loss and renewal. Beneath the waves, new life flourishes. Coral reefs bloom around the remains of oak and cypress. Fish shelter where roots once gripped the soil. The forests have not truly died. They have simply changed their shape, adapting to the rhythm of water and time. The sea took their form, but could not erase their spirit. Perhaps, then, they endure as symbols of resilience, quiet reminders that even in submersion, life finds a way to continue, to transform, and to begin again under the endless blue. Far beneath the restless tides, where sunlight fades into shifting blue twilight, lie the remnants of ancient forests that once stretched across lands now claimed by the sea. Their ghostly trunks stand like monuments in silence, coated with coral and seaweed, their roots entangled in centuries of sediment. These are not mere myths or the imagination of sailors. They're the true forests of the drowned world, places where trees once swayed in the wind, where birds sang, and where rivers carved paths through living green. Now, they exist only in the whispers of the currents and the flicker of fish weaving between their fallen limbs. Long ago, before the end of the last ice age, sea levels were hundreds of feet lower. The continents extended far beyond their current borders, and vast stretches of woodland connected what are now distant islands. People hunted there, gathered food, and watched the skies for signs of change. When the ice began to melt, the oceans rose slowly but relentlessly, swallowing valleys, plains, and forests alike. Generation after generation watched the waters creep closer, turning familiar ground into salt marsh, and salt marsh into sea. There were no sudden cataclysms, just an endless, rising hush as the waves took what had always seemed eternal. Off the coast of Britain, divers have found tree stumps preserved in the mud, still upright as they once grew. In the North Sea lies Doggerland, a lost country that once connected Britain to mainland Europe, a green world of rivers, meadows, and people now buried beneath the cold waves. Further south, in the Gulf of Mexico and the coast of Japan, other forests rest beneath the sea, some so well preserved that there would still smells faintly of pine when cut open. They are time capsules of an earth transformed, living proof that the boundaries we take for granted between land and ocean are fragile illusions. These submerged worlds are haunting not just because they are lost, but because they remind us how intimately the planet's breath affects our destiny. The rising seas that once consumed those forests are rising again today, driven not by melting glaciers alone, but by human hands that burn and build without restraint. The ocean is a patient archivist, recording every change, every shift in temperature, every echo of our choices. As the tide creeps higher along modern shores, it is as if the ghosts of those ancient trees whisper their warning. The sea always remembers, and it always returns. Yet there is also beauty in this cycle of loss and renewal. Beneath the waves, new life flourishes. Coral reefs bloom around the remains of oak and cypress. Fish shelter where roots once gripped the soil. The forests have not truly died. They have simply changed their shape, adapting to the rhythm of water and time. The sea took their form, but could not erase their spirit. Perhaps, then, they endure as symbols of resilience, quiet reminders that even in submersion, life finds a way to continue, to transform, and to begin again under the endless blue. Poets like Ferdowsi and Nizami wove elaborate tales of his travels to the ends of the earth, his encounters with the waters of life, and his quest for immortality. Within these stories lay veiled references to his resting place, an underground city of glass and light, guarded by spirits of flame. To Sufi mystics, the tomb symbolized the inward journey of the soul, a descent into darkness to discover divine illumination. Thus, the search for the physical tomb was mirrored by a search for spiritual truth. During the Renaissance, the legend resurfaced again, now refracted through the lens of science and exploration. European humanists, rediscovering the ancient world, scoured classical texts for clues. In dusty monasteries, they found maps, letters, and fragments of lost works describing the city of Alexandria and its wonders. One Florentine scholar, Giovanni Nardi, wrote of visiting Egypt in 1498 and being shown an ancient door beneath the sands, upon which the name of the great Macedonian was once inscribed. He was told by locals that it led to the sleeping king. though the passage had long been sealed by floods. Whether this was truth or a mirage conjured by Alexandria's layered myths, it reignited Europe's fascination with the lost tomb. As centuries passed, explorers, treasure hunters, and mystics each took up the trail. In the 18th and 19th centuries, when archaeology began to replace legend with science, the search became more systematic. Yet even then, mystery prevailed. Napoleon Bonaparte, during his Egyptian campaign, was said to have ordered his scholars to find Alexander's tomb. Some claimed they did, that they uncovered fragments of marble sarcophagi and inscriptions referring to the son of Zeus Ammon. But if such discoveries occurred, they were either lost or hidden, their details buried amid the chaos of war and empire. The secrecy surrounding Napoleon's findings only deepened the enigma, giving rise to theories that the conqueror had rediscovered the tomb and chosen to keep it secret. Through every era, the pattern remained the same: revelation followed by silence. Each supposed discovery was shadowed by disappearance, as if the tomb itself rejected exposure. Some believe this was divine will, that the resting place of Alexander was protected by forces unseen. Others suggested more earthly motives: political suppression, theft, or the simple fear of disturbing a legend too great to handle. For the seekers, this elusiveness was both curse and allure. To find Alexander's tomb meant to claim a fragment of immortality. To fail was to be consumed by the same ambition that had defined the man himself. And so the legend survived, not through confirmation, but through the persistence of those who refused to let it die. From Byzantine monks to Renaissance scholars, from mystics to military leaders, each generation added its own layer to the myth. Each left behind journals, sketches, and rumors, forming a mosaic of obsession that spanned continents and centuries. The tomb remained hidden, yet never forgotten, its absence more powerful than its presence. Even now, as modern archaeologists probe beneath Alexandria with sonar, satellite imagery, and radar, they follow the footsteps of those ancient seekers. They chase a ghost whose shadow grows only larger with time. And though they may claim to search for artifacts, perhaps what they truly seek is what those before them sought too: connection. The chance to touch, for a brief moment, the legend that refuses to rest. In the end, the story of the seekers is not about discovery. It is about longing, about humanity's refusal to accept that some mysteries are meant to remain unsolved. The lost tomb of Alexander is more than a burial site. It is a mirror of our own eternal curiosity, our defiance of forgetting, our hunger to uncover what the world has chosen to hide. The 19th century dawned with a hunger unlike any before, a hunger not merely for empire or trade, but for knowledge, discovery, and the recovery of lost glory. The Victorians lived in a time when history was no longer distant myth. It was a treasure waiting to be unearthed, cataloged, and conquered. And among all the lost wonders that haunted the imagination of scholars and explorers, none loomed larger than the tomb of Alexander the Great. It was not just a legend of marble and gold. It was the missing crown of civilization itself. To find it would be to complete the narrative of human ambition. By the 1800s, Alexandria had become a crossroads once more. Under British influence and archaeological curiosity, the city drew in a new breed of seekers, men who arrived not as conquerors, but as historians armed with compasses, notebooks, and dreams of immortality. The modern science of archaeology was in its infancy, but its practitioners saw themselves as heirs to the great explorers of old. They read ancient texts by torchlight and mapped the coastline where once Alexander's fleet had anchored. Every column and fragment buried in the sand whispered possibilities. The most persistent of these seekers was Giovanni Battista Caviglia, an Italian explorer who had already made his name excavating the pyramids. In 1821, he arrived in Alexandria determined to locate what he believed was the lost Soma, the body of Alexander himself. Guided by obscure references in Roman writings, Caviglia began digging near the old city center, close to the ancient necropolis. His workers unearthed fragments of sculpted granite, shattered columns, and an underground chamber sealed with stone. For a moment, he believed he had found it, but when the vault was opened, it revealed only the mummified remains of unknown priests. Still, he refused to give up. He wrote in his journal, "If the body of Alexander lies not here, then it sleeps beneath our very feet, deeper than time dares to remember." In London, word of his findings spread quickly. The British Museum, at the height of its collecting frenzy, began funding expeditions across Egypt, hoping to outdo the French in their archaeological triumphs. To the Victorians, ancient relics were not just artifacts. They were proof of civilization's linear progress, tokens of man's mastery over the past. But with that ambition came an undercurrent of mysticism. Many believed Alexander's tomb contained not only treasures, but forbidden knowledge, texts of lost philosophies, perhaps even the secret to his fabled preservation. Within the polished halls of Victorian salons, whispers grew that the tomb was hidden deliberately, protected by a curse that punished those who sought to disturb it. Among those captivated by the idea was the young scholar and adventurer Charles Kingsley, who once described Alexander as the link between man's will and God's silence. Kingsley joined an expedition to Egypt in the 1840s, recording his thoughts in letters filled with awe and unease. He described walking through the catacombs beneath Alexandria, where shadows seemed to move on their own. "I felt," he wrote, "as if the air itself remembered him." His group uncovered ancient marble fragments inscribed with the letters Alex, though the remainder was lost to erosion. To Kingsley, it was a sign. To his peers, it was coincidence. But such coincidences were the kindling of obsession. As the century advanced, the race to find the tomb became almost theatrical. Rival scholars issued competing claims, each declaring they had identified the site. Some pointed to the old Serapeum, arguing it once housed the relics of the conqueror before being converted into a Christian shrine. Others turned to the district now buried under the modern city, where legends spoke of a crypt sealed after a great earthquake. In 1850, a French archaeologist named Ambrose Mariette claimed to have discovered a sarcophagus of extraordinary craftsmanship bearing Greek inscriptions. But when the chamber collapsed during excavation, all evidence was lost. The fragments that survived vanished into private collections,